Hey everybody, what's going on? Um, Finally gonna make a video. It's been about a week. I've just been super busy. I had to go to work. I've been working extra hours and whatnot, trying to catch up. And it's also been the holiday and holiday weekend or whatever you call it, week. Haven't really had a whole lot of alone time. I've been making a whole lot of blog posts, but by the time I finish these blog posts, my brain is literally so scrambled lately that I don't have the energy to make videos, and it's already like 4 in the morning, and then I have to get up and go to work at 8 in the morning or around there. But in this video, I'm going to talk about, and it's going to be a really long video, so bear with me. There is an absolute ton of information that is connected up to the Miami Dolphins, but, it's connected to so many other things. And possibly what they're showing in this Miami Dolphin little thing, in this little interrelated web, is just for something completely different. And that's why I don't like making picks and predictions for the Super Bowl. I just want to show the coding that exists. As long as I've been doing this, it seems that a lot of times when they show you certain things, it's not always synced up to what you believe it's going to be, Just like why they showed you the Philadelphia 76ers a whole lot in regards to the Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors winning in the 2 different seasons and whatnot. And I honestly do not think that the Colts and the Vikings losing, and I never once said that it was going to be the Colts and Vikings. I made a few videos saying that in my head, I think that they're showing us that there's a possible rematch of the Cowboys versus the Colts, a lot like Super Bowl V, and it goes clear back to the death of Nebraska Cornhusker punter Sam Foltz. And I'll leave a link in the description of a playlist that I've made in regards to that. I'm going to leave a whole bunch of links, as many as I can think of that tie into what I'm talking about, in the description. And honestly, if you don't watch them videos or you don't come to the blog and read all of the things that I've been following for months or years, then this video, I'm going to do my best to re-explain some things, but there's a ton more to talk about. But if you don't go back and watch them videos, what I'm going to say in this video is absolutely going to make no sense whatsoever. If you don't watch the how-to gematria video before all of that in the description, if you're new to this channel, then you'll be completely lost. So watch the how-to gematria video, and then watch other links if you haven't in the description if you don't know what I'm talking about. But basically, there's been all of these interrelated sports stories, and they also connect to other events such as Donald Trump winning. They connect to Jesus Christ, it seems like, and there's some weird universal type code that I have talked about since the beginning of my channel. And I don't know exactly what it is, where it comes from, or why, but I feel like I've been getting shown a whole lot of information, and possibly what they're doing is I'm getting shown all of this just to, make me look stupid. I've been right or very close to multiple things that have happened. I even picked the Indians to lose to the Cubs in the World Series. And what's crazy about that is the reason I started following the Indians was because of a lot of media stories and other things that had connected to my own personal life. We had the Colts owner Jim Irsay, however you say his name, who bought Prince's Yellow Cloud guitar, and the boy who got ate by the alligator. It was synced up to the area that I live. My town was the halfway point between Storm Lake, Iowa, and Elkhorn, Nebraska, and this kid got ate in Lake Buena Vista, Florida, and I went to college in Storm Lake, Iowa that has Buena Vista University. A lot of weird stuff that synced up to what I was talking about, and my town was the town who killed the last keeper of the sacred pole of the Omaha Indians, and his name was Chief Yellow Smoke. Yellow Cloud, Yellow Smoke. There is so much going on with the story. Like I said, I will leave links in the description, but it truly does connect to the area that I live in. And the other night when I was listening to Zachary K. Hubbard's show, his radio show, The Gematria Effect, all kinds of weird things were happening to me. Just the craziest stuff was happening to me as I was looking at a certain word. Like somebody on the show, like he said, I looked at the word truth when I was researching while I was listening, and he said the word truth at the exact moment that I looked at the word, and it was synced up to a whole bunch of stuff in regards to the Miami Dolphins. And the reason I was looking this up, it was the band Flipper, the San Francisco band, but, they're made popular by the Seattle band Nirvana. Zach even from Seattle. I'll get to it. And, bear with me, this video is going to be super long because I'm going to try to cover all of these blog posts that I had posted and I haven't talked about yet. But anyway, in the whole mix of all that, I mentioned a whole bunch of stuff about the tribe of Dan and also about the key of David and the reason that Colin Kaepernick knelt during the national anthem because it was Francis Scott Key. And it sounds a lot like Francis got key. And in the Bible, they talk about the key of David and with the Church of Philadelphia, and Pope Francis's visit to the United States last year was super big and synced up to Philadelphia. That was the last place that he went. Francis got key. Jesus Christ is supposed to have the key of David. And if you research about the key of David, it even talks about, he's the one who can open it and no man can shut it and blah, blah, blah. And there's some theories and whatnot because there's not a whole lot of proven or known information about it. But basically, some people think that what is going on with it is the exact same thing that has been happening to me. And it, lately, just weird signs being shown to me. It's absolutely ramped up in the last couple weeks. I don't know what it is, but I've been getting so many things that sync up to stuff. It's just, my mind is being scrambled. Even earlier today, I was writing a post up, and I was talking about all of this Nebraska Cornhusker and Teen Wolf connections to UCLA, all kinds of stuff. But I'm typing up this post about it, and then my laptop just completely went black and it shut down. For no reason whatsoever. My laptop just shuts down. So I'm like, duh, okay, did my laptop die? What is the problem? And I go and I plug my laptop into the charger and I restart the computer, and it had 13% left when I plugged it in. So there's no reason that it would have died. Usually it pops up and says I have 10%, but 13, a number connected to Dan Marino, who wore number 13. And right when I turned my computer on, I looked up and there was a commercial on about wolves. And I was typing about Teen Wolf and Lupercalia, just some weird stuff. Honestly. And the very next day after I talked about the key of David and all of this and the Florida Keys and all kinds of stuff, the very next day we get this death of safety Keion Carpenter. Keion Carpenter, Jesus, the carpenter, the keys on the carpenter. He's supposed to have the key of David. Absolutely blowing my mind, So anyway, all that being said, let's go back to where a lot of this began. Maybe tomorrow night, because I have to work in the morning here in whatever. It's about 2 in the morning. Maybe tomorrow night I'll make this video in regards to Carrie Fisher, because that also connected to my very first YouTube copyright strike. And nobody really talked about the death of, can't think of the guy's name, the guy who played R2-D2. He died this year on 13/8 or August 13th. Donald Trump equals 138. There's also been all kinds of 813, 318, just anything with them 3 numbers. It's been all over the place lately, and it seems to be really synced up to, I don't know, there's a lot of connections to the Miami Dolphins. Maybe it's for something different. But his death was super synced up to Robin Williams and my first ever copyright claim. And when I looked up Carrie Fisher, she seems to really be connected from her first movie, Shampoo. It stars Warren Beatty, and it syncs up to my life, and maybe, it syncs up to the movie Heaven Can Wait, where he's the Los Angeles Ram. And that movie, we had the death of the Chris Rock guy, the guy from the Chris Rock show, whatever it is, Everybody Hates Chris. And then they had a thing with Gary Shandling, all in the news at the same time. And Chris Rock was in Down to Earth, which is basically a remake of Heaven Can Wait. And it synced up to Warren Beatty, who was in that movie where he was the Los Angeles Ram and he died. And then it was an accident by the Angels and they had to re-script his life and find him a new body. And a lot of this goes back to the Colts losing and the Vikings losing on the very same day. And everybody, it seems, thinks that they flipped the script because people were figuring it out. I don't think that whatsoever. I think that they did this on purpose. This is part of the script. To flip the script was part of the script that they've had planned for years. These people planned super in advance. There's something way greater going on than any of us truly understand. So, all of that being said then, let's look at some of the stuff that I presented in these last few blog posts. A lot of the stuff that I've talked about, the reason why Miami is so significant in it is because it connects to the Rams and the Nebraska Cornhuskers and Teddy Bridgewater being injured the same day, or right around the same time we got the story of Dwayne Wade, his cousin, being murdered in Chicago. Anyway, if you go back and watch the playlist that I have, last year in 2015, Teddy Bridgewater got injured the same weekend that Nebraska upset Michigan State. And then we got the death of the Nebraska punter and the ex-Michigan State punter, and the LSU player survived. But it was on November 7th, and then on November 8th, Teddy Bridgewater got knocked out and he was playing against the Rams. Teddy Bridgewater, originally from Miami, the guy that knocked him out, LaMarcus Joyner, also from Miami. And then this year, Teddy Bridgewater gets injured just before playing the Rams. Sorry, my cat keeps licking my leg or something, but Teddy Bridgewater gets injured just before playing the Rams, and Nebraska is super synced up to Moses. Moses, who brought in the age of Aries. Aries was the Ram, Nebraska equals 71. They won their first championship in the year 71, 17 days before the Colts and the Cowboys played in the Super Bowl, and they both played in the Orange Bowl in Miami. And the reason Colin Kaepernick sinks into all of that is because last year Nebraska played in the Foster Farms Bowl that was in San Francisco, and it's in Levi Stadium. Moses was in the tribe of Levi. Moses equals 71 in Gematria. The Ten Commandments equals 71 in Gematria. Moses freed the slaves. Nebraska plays in Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln freed the slaves. They even play in, it's Memorial Stadium, but they call it the Sea of Red a lot like the Chiefs. But Moses, part of the Red Sea. I mean, I'm telling you, I have tons of videos on it. And this year, there was a big deal about Colin Kaepernick not starting. The last time that Colin Kaepernick started was against none other than the Rams last season. And this season, the only two games that the 49ers won were against the Rams. And I thought, how interesting, the 49ers get their second win of the season, both of them against the Rams, on the same day that the Colts and the Vikings get knocked out of the playoffs. And what's interesting, I made a video about the death of Alan Thicke. Alan Thicke from Growing Pains, and I talked about how when you went to look up the episodes of Growing Pains on Wikipedia, it was missing the 51st episode, and we're going into Super Bowl 51, and the last thing that he was in was Fuller House that's set in San Francisco. But anyway, Super Bowl LI and Gematria equals 912. Alan Thicke died 9 months, 12 days after his birthday. He's famous for the TV show Growing Pains. Growing Pains equals 900. Growing Pains equals 912 in gematria. And something that I overlooked in this episode of Fuller House, and the episode of Fuller House also came out on December 9th, which in most parts of the world they write it 9/12, a lot like 912. Something that I overlooked because they were talking about luck and all kinds of stuff in this, and then they had the 39. I said Cowboys equal 39. 39 also a number connected to New York, a super big number in New York. This show takes place in San Francisco, and look at the jersey and the uniform this kid's wearing. It looks like a Rams uniform, the yellow and blue and whatnot. I just completely overlooked that. And I mean, all of the Cowboys Colts stuff, and they played that Super Bowl in Miami, so I thought possibly all of this is just for Miami. Possibly that's what it's all about. We will see. That's what I'm going to keep following this. I've been following this. There's a few things that make me think that it is all for the Patriots as well. We had the death of Florence Henderson, also the Brady Bunch lady, but her name equaled 45, just like Miami. And there was other 45s in that story. And in regards to the Cubs winning, the Cubs won the World Series. There's a bunch of stuff with Back to the Future. And, the Cubs were supposed to beat Miami in the World Series. So the Cubs won the World Series. Possibly Miami's going to win the Super Bowl. It was even, Marty McFly goes back 131 years ago to 1885 when Grover Cleveland was the president. But anyway, they used train number 131 to push the DeLorean to go back to 1985. In 1985, that's when the Dolphins last made the Super Bowl. Super Bowl in gematria equals 131. Championship equals 131. It's possibly that's what it's all for. But just wanted to point out, I overlooked the fact that this kid was wearing what looks like a Rams jersey. The show's set in San Francisco. And then all of the stuff I've been talking about for months, the San Francisco 49ers beat the Rams. The only two wins they got this year were against the Rams. I also mentioned the Dolphins bullying scandal in this post. And the reason that I mentioned the Dolphins bullying scandal was because there seems to be a bunch of stuff synced up to Super Bowl 48 that's connected to Super Bowl 51. And just think about all the 48 symbolism lately. Talked about the Donald Trump in gematria equals 48 the small way. The Indians were in the World Series and they hadn't won the World Series since the year 48. 48 was the year Israel declared its independence. We just got the big supermoon. The last biggest supermoon happened in the year 48, but that happened on Prince Charles's birthday. Lots of 48 symbolism, reminding me of Super Bowl 48. But anyway, in regards to that bullying scandal, Richie Incognito, the former Nebraska Cornhusker, but his name in gematria equals 158. The guy he bullied, Jonathan Martin, equals 158. And they even mentioned how Jonathan Martin might have actually just been mad because he got moved over the position because of Bryant McKinney. Bryant McKinney equals 158. Oh, the odds that all three of them equal the same thing, and they're all involved in it. And there's a whole lot more to this story as well as we move on. I know I posted more about it. The reason that I bring this bullying scandal back up is because it's connected to what I was talking about with the Colts and the Cowboys. Richie Incognito even began his career with the Rams, and Jonathan Martin finished his career, or the last game that he played at least, was with the 49ers. But after the bullying scandal, Jonathan Martin's first game back was against the Cowboys when he played with the 49ers, and Incognito's first game back after the bullying scandal was against the Colts. Oh, the odds, Martin also wore number 71 for the 49ers. Nebraska equals 71. Moses, connected to the Rams, where Richie Incognito began his NFL career. And then Jonathan Martin also went to Stanford, which seemed like an Andrew Luck connection because of Andrew Luck going to Stanford. But Nebraska, I also looked up Nebraska and their record with Stanford. They've only played Stanford one time ever in the 1941 Rose Bowl. And at the time, Stanford was called the Indians. I mean, how fitting to all of the stuff that I've been talking about. I've talked about a huge Native American theme as well. Later on, I even mentioned how the last Super Bowl that the Miami Dolphins were in, they lost to the 49ers, and Dan Marino was on the team. Super Bowl 19 that was played in Stanford Stadium. So anyway, I got this all, like I said, it's all jumbled up here, but the Rams were even originally from Cleveland, named after Moses Cleveland. There's tons of Moses stuff. A long time ago, clear back in the NFL draft, I think on May 1st even, I posted it, which is odd enough, 5-1, Super Bowl 51. I talked about Laramie Tunsil and his bong hit and whatnot, but I mentioned that Dolphins equal 97. It's the 97th season of the NFL. We're going into Super Bowl 51, and the Dolphins are in their 51st season. And I even mentioned how I thought it was somehow connected to a tribute to Dan Marino. But I will talk about that as we move along here as well. And possibly this is nothing. I just mentioned how, for some reason, when I think of Dan Marino not winning the Super Bowl, and there's been all this heaven and hell type of symbolism going on lately, all of the fires and whatnot that are super connected. But just kind of funny that Dan Marino is asking the devil to win the Super Bowl in that movie, just in regards to the hell symbolism. And another thing, in this Laramie Tunsil post that I made a long time ago, I talked about how Laramie Tunsil was the 13th pick in the draft, and 13 minutes before the draft, he posted the video or the whatever it was of him hitting the bong or whatever. 13. There was a few other 13s in the story, but it made me think of Dan Marino, and Dan Marino was in Super Bowl 19, which was Super Bowl X1X, and a lot of stuff has been synced up to the death of Prince all year. Even the World Series, Prince died on the 112th day of the year. The World Series was the 112th World Series. It came to an end on 11/2. LeBron James in 2015 was even Prince for Halloween. Kevin Love was Jackie Moon. Prince died on the night of a full moon. I mean, tons of stuff. But in the Simpsons episode that killed off Prince, that came out on 11/2, November 2nd, it was called Treehouse of Horror X1X, which is 19. And Dan Marino last took the Dolphins to the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 19. And I even mentioned how on The Simpsons, Dan Marino was only on one episode, episode 215, which was also a lot like 215, the day that Vanity, Prince's protege, had died. But trust me, it gets way better in regards to this episode. I actually watched the episode, and Dolly Parton is even in the episode. There's been a whole bunch of symbolism in regards to Dolly Parton lately. I typed out Super Bowl XIX in Gematria, and Jewish Gematria, it equals 2016. I know this year the Super Bowl's in 2017, but interesting, it's in the 2016 season. And last year, everything was all about the 85 Bears, who won the Super Bowl in 1986. But all of the stuff that led up to it, it was a ton of 85 references. So possibly that is something synced up. Pretty interesting that it equals 2016, though. Also in the Alan Thicke post, I talked about how the coach in this episode, the episode 51, I even mentioned the Jesus stuff that I'll get into here in a minute, but I mentioned that the coach's name was Coach Lubbock, and he was the one who, he's the teacher for the school play, Coach Lubbock, and I talked about the Lubbock lights that equal 51, and they happened in the year 1951. It was one of the first famous UFO cases in the United States. Lubbock Lights 51 happened in the year 51. Think about Area 51. The word conspiracy equals 51. Tinfoil hat equals 51. But anyway, I found it kind of interesting. It was all about Lubbock and whatnot. And then Ryan Tannehill, the Miami Dolphins quarterback who just got hurt after playing 13 games, syncing up to Dan Marino's number, he's from Lubbock, Texas. How interesting is that? Also, Tannehill's first game ever in the NFL, of course, against Houston. Houston's where the Super Bowl is going to be held this year. Right now we have Matt Moore. Matt Moore is the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, replacing him. And he also played for UCLA, and then he went to Oregon State. UCLA was the team super synced up to the Teen Wolf stuff in regards to Nebraska. It stems all the way back to the 2015 NBA All-Star Week where Zach LaVine, the teen Minnesota Timberwolf, won the slam dunk contest. Andrew Wiggins, the night before, won the Rising Star Challenge MVP. He was also a Teen Wolf. And then Russell Westbrook won the MVP of the All-Star Game. And it was over February 13th, 14th, and 15th, which is the same days as the Festival of Lupercalia, the celebration and sacrifice of the wolf. But anyway, Russell Westbrook went to UCLA, Zach LaVine went to UCLA, and Andrew Wiggins was traded to Minnesota from the Cleveland Cavaliers for Kevin Love, who also went to UCLA. And then Nebraska played UCLA in the Foster Farms Bowl. And if you watch the movie Teen Wolf, it's not set and it's not filmed in Nebraska, but there's Nebraska Cornhusker stuff all throughout the movie in the background. The mascot in that movie is based off of the Oregon State Beavers. Mike Riley, Nebraska's coach, known mostly for Oregon State, right? And now he's the coach of Nebraska. And I've been talking about this since 2015 when he became the coach there. But interesting, Matt Moore went to UCLA, and he also went to Oregon State, and he was coached under Mike Riley, Nebraska's coach. And there's so much more along with the Teen Wolf stuff. We had the death of Flip Saunders, right? Think about it. Flipping the script. Flipper, the famous dolphin. Flip Saunders. Super synced up to Kevin Garnett, who just retired. Kevin Garnett, the original Teen Wolf. Hopefully my point is clear on that. Also, Matt Moore was originally drafted to the Cowboys. His name, super fitting for both teams that he plays for. Matt Moore equals 39 and 102 in Gematria. Cowboys equal 39 and 102 in Gematria. They equal 30 as well, but with the S exception equals 39. The big way 102. If you write out Matt Moore's full name, it equals 97, just like Dolphins. This happens all of the time. So many players, their names are synced up to the teams that they play for. And in regards to the number 13 and Dan Marino, think about it. Matt Moore, MM, 13 is M's the 13th letter, 13, 13. And before I even go into it anymore, I want to show what I recorded today in regards to Matt Moore and the Miami Dolphins versus the Patriots game. Just listen to what they say about Matt Moore. They say that before the season began or whatever, Matt Moore had a meeting with Dallas, and then he was going to visit Indianapolis before he came to Miami. Now, why would they bring that up? Dallas and the Colts, once again. I'm telling you, everything I've talked about, it is synced up to the Super Bowl, but it's just not always synced up the way you think it's synced up. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. So let's just check this clip out really quick.
Behind the secondary, and Moore delivers. In the offseason, Moore had a meeting with Dallas. He was going to visit Indianapolis. And then he was encouraged to meet with Adam Gase by Chris Greer, the general manager. He was hesitant at first. After 5 minutes of the meeting, he said to himself, "I'm in."
Just hopefully you can hear that. If not, read the captions, possibly not. But they're even down by 13 points. Just throwing that out there. And there was a whole bunch of other stuff in this game that I'll get to in regards to the number 17. Dan Marino played for 17 seasons. His last game was 17 years ago on January 15th of 2017. So if the Dolphins actually do keep winning, It'll be 17 years after Marino retired after playing 17 seasons. And so much more. Tannehill wearing number 17. I also mentioned how Matt Moore, last season, the only game that he got to play in was the game against Houston, right? The Super Bowl being played in Houston. It was his 44th game, and the Dolphins won with 44 points. This year, the Super Bowl is on a date numerology of 44. 2 plus 5 plus 20 plus 17. He's also only played 40, well, it's 49 now after losing to the Patriots, 49 career games. And I mentioned how interesting it would be if he kept playing until his 51st game, and then they brought Tannehill back for the Super Bowl, and Tannehill could win. It would be his Tannehill's 79th game ever in the NFL. The word champion equals 79. Miami Dolphins equals 79. I mean, isn't it interesting, all of the quarterback dilemma? I mentioned previously about the 1971 season and how the Dallas Cowboys, there was a quarterback controversy between Craig Morton, born on February 5th, 1943. You know, the same day the Super Bowl is going to be played this year. Also, Roger Staubach, born on the same day as Craig Morton, the one that they had a quarterback controversy in that Super Bowl. Just think about all of the quarterback controversies this year. Bridgewater getting injured, bringing in the former Ram, Sam Bradford, to play for Minnesota. Even, Colin Kaepernick, he didn't start for how long there. The Patriots, Tom Brady sitting out for Deflategate and whatnot. Just lots of quarterback controversy. In Gematria, a quarterback equals 45, just like Miami as well. And, it even syncs up to Donald Trump yet again, because Donald Trump going to be the 45th president and whatnot. Or who knows? Who knows what will happen before. One other thing I want to point out in regards to the growing pain stuff before I move on is I also mentioned how in growing pains, the school is actually called Thomas E. Dewey High School, and it's named after the guy who lost the 1948 election. It was the biggest election upset in American history, reminding us of a lot of Donald Trump. He lost to Harry S. Truman, who's the only president to die at the age of 88. Trump in Gematria equals 88. The Vikings finished 8-8. The Colts finished 8-8. Lots of 88 stuff. It's been 88 years. Next year, 2017, will be the 88th anniversary of the great stock market crash and Donald Trump becoming the president, the guy who supposedly can manage money and whatnot. But anyway, in regards to that, this guy, Thomas Dewey, who the school is named after, he also died in Miami. So, pretty interesting. Just a ton of Miami references, whether it's for Miami to win the Super Bowl. I really feel like that's why they showed us the Colts and the Cowboys so much, is because of, or especially the Colts. It seemed like I've seen a lot with the Colts all year. And a lot of it, I think, just has to do with the 1971 Super Bowl that was in Miami. So let's go back here. Let's find some of my other posts. So also last year, or a long time ago, I talked about Arian Foster. And Arian Foster is the former Houston Texan who tore his Achilles. And what's interesting about that is he became a Miami Dolphin this year. Then, out of nowhere, he retires in October. And he tore his Achilles versus Miami. Then he became, a Miami Dolphin the next season, which is kind of sticks out to me. The Super Bowl being played in Houston. He tears his Achilles against Miami. The next season he plays in Miami. When I looked up his 51st game ever, he played against the Colts. So how interesting is that? How it's interrelated. The game that he tore his Achilles on was the only game that Matt Moore had ever played in last season. Remember when Miami won on Matt Moore's 44th game and they scored 44 points? And I remember this game because the Dolphins were winning 41-0 at halftime, and then the game ended up being 44-26. 41 in Gematria, Super Bowl equals 41. And a lot of times, that's how they do this. They do it, maybe the year before, year after. It's somehow always synced up to a certain time, And the Houston Texans record also became 2-5 after this game. The Super Bowl is going to be played on February 5th, 2-5. Also, their away record became 1-3, a lot like 13 and Dan Marino. Also interesting that the Texans almost made a comeback, right? Or it seemed that way. They scored 13 points in the third quarter, 13 points in the fourth quarter, 13-13. The only game that Matt Moore plays against them, Matt Moore, 13-13. The only game that he played all last season. How interesting. If you write out the word 13, it equals 45, just like Miami. And if you watch my videos in the description, I even talk about how there's something very special about Obama coming to Omaha, Nebraska in 2016 on January 13th, the 13th day of the year. And that was also the same day that the ex-Nebraska Cornhusker Lawrence Phillips died. And Obama went to Baxter Arena, which is UNO, University of Northern Omaha, that is connected to the University of Nebraska system or whatever. So it has a connection to the University of Nebraska, where Lawrence Phillips is from. Lawrence Phillips, when he was drafted to the NFL, he went to the Rams. Then he was also a Dolphin. Then he was also a 49er. How interesting. And I also talked about Sam Foltz's last game was in the Foster Farms Bowl in Levi's Stadium. If you write out Foster Farms Bowl, it equals 192. Lawrence Phillips died 192 days before Sam Foltz. Indianapolis Colts equal 192. Andrew Austin Luck 192. Obama in English Gematria equals 192. NFL equals 192. I talked about how Obama, the very next day, went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, for the first time ever, and he gave a speech at McKinley High School in Baton Rouge, and then we had the Alton Sterling stuff. And the reason that McKinley High School is so significant, McKinley, also the 25th president, which reminds us of 2-5, the day that the Super Bowl is going to be played this year. But Obama went to McKinley High School, and Baton Rouge is named after the Homa people. Sounds pretty close to Omaha, right? The Homa people. It's named after the red stick marking the hunting boundaries of the Homa people. And we got the story of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, and then the same day we got that story, we got the story of Philando Castile in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. Falcon Heights, Minnesota is where Teddy Roosevelt, think about Teddy Bridgewater, Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt gave a famous speech about carrying the big stick and whatnot. The big stick, and then Baton Rouge named after the red stick. Teddy Roosevelt, just days after giving that speech in Falcon Heights, he was the vice president for William McKinley, who got assassinated in Buffalo, New York at the World Fair or whatever. And Buffalo syncs up huge into a bunch of stuff that I've mentioned in my previous stuff. But, Richie Incognito even plays for the Buffalo Bills right now. There's just a whole lot more going on with the story, but interesting, all of the assassinated president type stuff. I mean, it seems pretty ripe for an assassinated president as of late, especially with Trump being the 44th person to be the president. Obama, the 44th president. Kill equals 44. It's a big number in regards to, it always syncs up to death and assassinated presidents. Anyway, I guess, if this is where it gets kind of weird, because this is the type of weird stuff that happens. So this jersey right here, this Dan Marino jersey, one day just appeared. I don't know what day it was. I wish I knew the exact day. It was sometime either this summer or sometime in the fall. I came home one day, and this jersey, this Dan Marino jersey, was hanging up on my front porch. And I thought it was just a joke of, like, some of my friends, because a lot of times if I go out or whatever, I wear my Chad Henne jersey just because I don't have that many clothes and whatever. I just put on my Chad Henne jersey because I have like 2 pair of pants and like three or 4 shirts, and I just thought it was weird. I thought maybe it was some type of joke that my friends wanted me to wear a different, like, Dolphins jersey or something because they gave me crap about wearing that jersey because Chad Henne sucks and whatever, and they don't realize that it's all rigged. I try to tell them, but anyway, it turns out that my uncle gave me this jersey. My uncle, who has cancer, I guess he's still going through chemo, whatever. It's like, I don't even know. He had cancer like 10 years ago. It came back, whatever. And they had to take his tongue out, and you could barely understand him. But what's messed up, so he left this on my porch because he knew that when I was a kid, I loved the Dolphins, and he told me it doesn't fit me anymore. I don't know what team he actually really likes or whatever. That'd be something interesting to know. I know it's not the Dolphins, but that's why he left this for me, because I'm the only Dolphins fan that he knows or something. But what's interesting is I actually found out that he was the one who gave me the jersey like 2 weeks later. And I was at the restaurant that I go to where my mom works. She works at the school, but she also works at this restaurant. And whatever, my uncle used to own it, and I still just go there frequently, and I went there, and my uncle was there, and he asked me if I got the jersey or something, and I was like, you were the one who sent that jersey to me, or you were the one who put that there? I've been wondering where that came from, and he told me he sent me a text, but my phone was turned off because I couldn't afford the bill at the time or whatever for my phone. So anyway, a couple weeks later, I find out that my uncle is the one who left this jersey. And I found out at the Gold Slipper. Gold Slipper equals 166. The Gold Slipper is this restaurant in town. And my uncle's name, who gave me the jersey, equals 166. And this number comes up again later as it connects to Donald Trump, who turned 70 years old on the 166th day this year, which Miami Dolphins equals 70 in gematria. Donald Trump turned 70 on the 166th day of the year. It was also Pope Francis's 1,189th day as being the Pope. Key of David in gematria equals 1,189. Donald J. Trump equals 1,189. There's 1,189 chapters in the King James Bible. Just weird stuff, how it all syncs up. I also mentioned how the only jerseys that I have a Nick Van Exel jersey. I believe it's when he played for the Warriors. I can't even think of what the number is. I don't even know where it is. It's somewhere in the drawer. But the only football jerseys that I have are Chad Henne and Jake Long, both Michigan players. I used to be a Michigan fan and whatnot, and a Dolphins fan. So Chad Henne, when he played for the Dolphins, he wore number 7. Jake Long, when he played for the Dolphins, wore number 77. So I thought that was kind of interesting. 777. And I posted about this before or made a video on it. In regards to how there's been some weird stuff too. In regards to my family and how it syncs up to cancer. And it blows my mind. So I also talked about my uncle's brothers, which is my mom's brothers. She had 8 brothers and sisters or whatever. And so far, my mom's dad died of cancer before I was born. Then my Uncle Kelly died of cancer. Then my Uncle Mike died of cancer. Now my Uncle Barney is most likely going to die of cancer. So I thought that was pretty weird, and I just started looking up some stuff in regards to him. And the first one who died was my Uncle Kelly, and he died... Him and my Uncle Mike died 5 months and 3 days apart. And they all grew up in Ralston, Nebraska, that equals 53. Nebraska with the S and K exception equals 53. Right now my mom's 53 years old. Super Bowl LI equals 53. The blog that I posted it on said that it was posted at 9:12. Even though this website's messed up on this blog because it always does it Pacific time, even though I'm in Central time. So just still interesting that it says that I posted it at 9:12. Super Bowl LI and English gematria equals 912. So my Uncle Kelly Murphy equals 166. He is the first to die of cancer in my family or whatever. Barney Murphy equals 166. The guy who gave me the Dan Marino jersey. Also, I found out the gold slipper that equals 166. Michael Murphy, my other uncle who died of cancer, his name equals 152, like Super Bowl LI and simple gematria. He also died the same day as the Philadelphia train wreck that I've made multiple videos on. And, you know, interesting, the MM name, M1313, his wife is Rosa Murphy. Her real name is Kathy, but my whole life I've called her Rosa Murphy. Teddy Bridgewater's mom's named Rose Murphy. I mentioned that in a post before as well. There's something weird. Teddy Bridgewater born on the same day as me. He's born on my birthday, November 10th, the day that leaves 51 days in the year. Super Bowl 51. My Uncle Kelly then, the first one to die or whatever, he died on my brother's 25th birthday. I have one brother and one sister. The odds of him dying on my brother's 25th birthday, the Super Bowl being played on 2/5, my brother's name in gematria equals the same as Super Bowl. And just the other day, or whatever it was, probably a couple weeks ago now, Facebook said that there was a post 51 minutes ago by my brother when I got on Facebook, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. My brother has not been on Facebook forever. I went to his deal, there wasn't anything. It was just like some, whatever, it got hacked or whatever. 51 minutes ago it said though, and I found out my brother's name equaled 131 like Super Bowl. My brother's favorite team is the Lions, and my mom was missing her cat, which is pretty weird. Lion and cat. Lions equal 24, cat equals 24. My mom they actually got my mom's cat back too. I thought this was what's even weirder. So my Uncle Barney's wife, Betty, yes, Betty and Barney, like the Flintstones even, but there was a cat outside of her house that looked just like the cat that my mom had lost. And whatever, I posted about it on my blog or whatever, and hoping that we'd find this cat before Christmas for my mom and whatnot. And it turns out it wasn't that cat, but just how interesting it syncs up yet again to my Uncle Barney. And they ended up finding the cat 6 miles away, out of town, on what we call the Gold Slipper Highway. I mean, that's pretty weird stuff. And it was at somebody's house that used to live in my uncle's house or whatever, but my uncle, on my dad's side or whatever, my dad's sister married this guy, they got divorced or whatever, and it was at their house out in the country where I spent a good amount of my childhood with my cousin and whatnot. So it's just pretty strange it was that far out of town, right off the Gold Slipper Highway. I get this Dan Marino jersey from my uncle, who equals the same as the Gold Slipper. I find out I got it from him at the Gold Slipper. You know, too, if somehow the Dolphins and the Lions end up playing each other, and the Lions sync up to a whole bunch of stuff too, you know, Jesus Christ was the Lion of the tribe of Judah, which I'll get into in a minute. Or eventually, I'm telling you, this video is going to be long, but if somehow them two teams end up playing each other, they'll both be wild card teams, and in gematria, wild card teams equals 132 and 51. Pretty fitting for the Super Bowl this year. Cancer equals 132. My grandpa, of all these people, my mom's dad or whatever, his name was Gene Murphy. I know I posted this earlier, but Gene Murphy, 132. He died of cancer. Cancer equals 132 in gematria. And he also died on 12/21 of 1980, a date numerology of 132. And his birthday was October 12th, which I'll get into in a little bit. I mean, it's pretty strange, pretty weird stuff, how that all syncs up and whatnot. So, I also mentioned in this post how my uncle was a 4th degree Knights of Columbus, Uncle Barney is. And the only reason I knew that was because at my Uncle Mike's funeral, there were a bunch of people who were dressed up like the Three Musketeers and whatnot. Had no idea what was going on, to tell you the truth. I was like, I don't know. I was like, what in the world are they dressed up like the Three Musketeers? I made a video on it a long time ago. But, you know, that being said, maybe I'm just being naive to something, but my uncle is not a bad person. I don't think he has any clue of the stuff that I am talking about. And that goes for a lot of Freemasons as well. I think that what I'm talking about in regards to Freemasonry, which it's very obvious that Freemasonry is involved, and there are Freemasons who know what is going on, and they're hoaxing the news and doing everything else, but I don't think it's every single Freemason. I don't think it's every Knight of Columbus. I mean, these people who are doing it, they just do it through Freemasonry, which maybe possibly not everybody knows, you know? Not everybody who is involved in it knows what truly is going on. And it's so much bigger than just Freemasons doing this, you know? In my experience from doing all of these numbers and everything else for so long, there's totally people who know about it and are manipulating it, but there's also something so much greater going on, or possibly they're just manipulating me to make me think this. Or, you know, there's so much more I could say. I mean, is there ever a true answer to anything? That's why I do this, because I don't know the answer. I'm trying to figure it out. But I totally know there are people behind it, and that's why I mention all the time. And you wouldn't get trolled, you wouldn't get death threats if there weren't people behind it. It doesn't make that much sense. But even that being said, so in my research here, I talk about the town Denison, Iowa. That's 19 miles away, believe it or not. You know, the Dolphins were in Super Bowl 19 the last time they were in the Super Bowl. But I talk about how I seriously never knew there was a Freemason lodge there. And I found it on Google Maps or whatever. I looked it up. And then I found another Freemason lodge that was in Manila, Iowa. And 2 of the people that I know are actually in that lodge. And their names in gematria equal the same thing. So what are the odds of that, you know? It's pretty strange stuff. Just, oh, man. So anyway, also Barney in gematria equals 65 and 29. Football equals 29. Barney 65. Miami, Florida 65. 7, like all my jerseys. 7 equals 65. 7 is also the 7th prime is also 17 that connects to Dan Marino and Tannehill. Anyway, back to Arian Foster. His last game before retiring was against Buffalo, who the Dolphins just beat on the same day we found out the Colts and the Vikings lost. And whatever, so we found out they weren't going to the Super Bowl. The Dolphins beat Buffalo. Notice the score of Arian Foster's last game against Buffalo. And he only played 44 games, too. Or he had 44 wins. 44 wins. The Super Bowl is played on a date numerology of 44, and it's going to be on the 36th day of the year. But anyway, 28 to 25, 2-5, a lot like the day the Super Bowl is going to be played. You add that up, though, total score 53, just like Super Bowl LI. The Dolphins, after this game, became 2-5, and they scored 25 points. You know, pretty interesting. Trump in gematria equals 25 as well, the small way. This is where it really got interesting, and I watched the Simpsons episode with Dan Marino. The first game of the Dolphins season this year, the Dolphins lost 10-12 to Seattle. And Seattle was who won the Super Bowl 48, which I said that it's connected to. So what else is interesting about the Dolphins losing 10-12? So, you take out the 0 in numerology, it's a lot like 112. Houston, where the Super Bowl is going to be played, Houston equals 112. But it was also the same day the Colts and the Vikings, where we found out they were both eliminated from the playoffs. And then Houston won the division, and they beat the Bengals, and the score was 10-12. So, pretty interesting. The only 2 games in the whole season this year that were 10-12 was the Dolphins losing to Seattle, and then the Houston beating the Bengals. And remember how I talked about how it's connected to Super Bowl 48, where the Seahawks beat the Broncos? It was also the same season as the Dolphins bullying scandal, and the Dolphins bullying scandal began after the Dolphins played the Bengals on Halloween, and then they suspended Richie Incognito. So it's a little interrelated web of stuff. The score of Super Bowl 48 even totaled up to 51. We're going to Super Bowl 51. The Seahawks had 43 points. Dolphins equal 43. Earlier I mentioned how the 49ers beat the Rams 22-21. That equals 43. I also noticed that, Arian Foster, most famous for wearing number 23 with Houston, and then he becomes the running back for the Dolphins and then retires early or just kind of out of nowhere, So he is number 23, and now the Dolphins star running back this year is this guy, Jay Ajayi, or however you say his name. He's number 23. He's age 23. He's also from London, England, which connects to all the Prince stuff that I've been talking about. Number 23, age 23, replaces Arian Foster, who wears number 23, or he's famous for wearing number 23. And he was also born on the 166th day of the year, June 15th, normally the 166th day of the year. This year was a leap year, so June 14th, Donald Trump's birthday, was the 166th day of the year. But how interesting. Another 166. It connects to, my uncle giving me that Miami Dolphins jersey at the Gold Slipper. My other uncle equals 166. In regards to 23, the 23rd prime is 83. The word football, the big way, equals 83. I guess I go on to talk about George Michael. I was going to make some stuff about George Michael and whatnot. And Ace Ventura, which I did rewatch a little bit, but I didn't watch it as in depth as I should have. But, I also talked about Ndamukong Suh, he was a former Lion who came to the Miami Dolphins and whatnot. And Richie Incognito, the bully, right? And Sue and Incognito, both known as bullies. I mean, there's something significant to it. They both came from Nebraska. They both played in Miami. So I also go into detail here about the Prince's Yellow Claw guitar and Jim Irsay buying Prince's Yellow Claw guitar, and I talk about how it's related to Yellow Smoke in the town that I live in, killed the last keeper of the sacred pole of the Omaha Indians, Chief Yellow Smoke, who also got murdered in the year 68. The town I live in is Dunlap, that equals 68. I forgot to mention, too, in the Philando Castile stuff, the area that he supposedly got shot in, all of the street names were connected to where I live. Like, one of them was Dunlap Street. I live in the town Dunlap. There was another one called Iowa Avenue. I grew up on Iowa Avenue. That's where my parents live. There was another one that was like Underwood something that was connected to where my brother lives. Like, a lot of really weird stuff going on. But I even went camping at Yellow Smoke Park this year. That's in Denison, Iowa. That's where Brandon Scherf of the Washington Redskins is from, which synced up to the Indians being in the World Series, and that is part of the reason why I knew the Indians were going to be in the World Series. But the town that he is from is Denison, Iowa, and that is where Yellow Smoke Park is. And we were going to actually go camping, because my daughter wanted to go camping for her birthday. And instead of going to Ottawa, we went to Yellow Smoke Park. But Ottawa is where Casino Omaha is, and it is on the reservation of the Omaha Indians or whatever. So, and then Yellow Smoke, the last keeper of the sacred pole. What are the odds of that, you know? But there's so much more going on to it. Richie Incognito born on 7/5, which is also the same day that we got the story of the death of the former Iowa Hawkeye named Kyle Calloway. And he formerly was a Buffalo Bill. And Yellow Smoke Park in Denison, it's basically in between the two towns, Vale, Iowa, and Denison, Iowa. And my Uncle Kelly, the first one to die from cancer, he was from Vale, Iowa. And Brandon Scherf, the Washington Redskin, is from Denison, Iowa. I even talked about Kevin Costner, the guy he portrays in the movie JFK. He's from Denison, Iowa. Jim Garrison. And a whole bunch of other things. Kevin Costner connected for, the movie The Bodyguard, and there's a Dolly Parton connection in there as well. Dolly Parton actually wrote the song I Will Always Love You. And Whitney Houston died at age 48, and her daughter's name, Bobby Brown, equals 48, and her husband, Bobby Brown, he's going to turn 48 on the same day as Super Bowl 51. Lots of stuff going with it. I mean, like I said, I'll try to find the links and post a big old playlist or post a bunch of links. But Brandon Scherf equals 70 in Gematria, just like Miami Dolphins. He wears number 75 for the Redskins. Indianapolis Colts equals 75. Minnesota Vikings equals 75. Cincinnati Bengals equals 75. 7/5 was also the day that Alton Sterling died in Baton Rouge. Talked about how it's connected to Omaha. I made a post today, too, about how the colors in them two stories was a turquoise color that I thought was connected to the Native American stuff. My girlfriend asked me, I was wearing that jersey today, the Marino jersey, and she said, how come their jerseys are a different ugly teal color than the jersey that you have on? And I was like, I don't know, probably it was from the 80s or 90s. And it's 2017. And then, for whatever the reason, that sparked my brain, and it reminded me of the Alton Sterling, Philando Castile stuff. So, look at this. This is Alton Sterling. The big color in the story was this color right here that looks exactly like the Miami Dolphins colors. Philando Castile, this is supposedly his girlfriend, wearing the same color. This person wearing the color. This guy with his whatever shirt in the background, the same color. Interesting. I talked about how it's connected to the Native Americans at the time too. Turquoise. I said, there's lots of things that say that, but it's not necessarily connected to that. But lots of New Age stuff talking about turquoise being connected to Native Americans. Also, I mentioned today how, and I mentioned this a long time ago, how in the background of Alton Sterling's family, this is supposedly his son crying into the guy with the Miami Heat hat. And if you notice, I never noticed this before, but the microphones are 2 and 9. The word football equals 29. And the Cubs, Chicago, just won the World Series. Just makes me wonder if, the 2-9, it's synced up to Back to the Future stuff that I'm talking about. Dwayne Wade. This was the same day that Dwayne Wade left the Miami Heat and he signed with the Chicago Bulls. Once again, Miami and Chicago, the connections and whatnot. Possibly they're telling us the Cubs were in the World Series. Miami winning the Super Bowl. Dwayne Wade also attended the Nebraska game this year with his wife Gabrielle Union, Abraham Lincoln, Civil War. last year in 2015 was the first time he'd ever went to a game. Talked about how it's synced up to the number 95 and 117. Tannehill equals 95. I'll come back to this. I even talk about the death of Jose Fernandez. That he equals 142. The Cuban Miami player or whatever. We had the death of Fidel Castro this year. You know, Cuba equals 27. Miami equals 27. Wonder why there's so many Cubans in Miami. Sam Foltz, the Nebraska punter, war number 27. I mean, if you've been following this stuff a long time and you know what I'm talking about, you can see the significance of what I'm saying. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to be completely lost, and you haven't even made it this far into the video anyway. I also mentioned, in regards to the Packers possibly, is that in the movie The Big Lebowski, they go to Ralph's and he writes the check on 9/11. There's been a bunch of 9/11 symbolism too. Hillary Clinton collapsing on 9/11. Donald Trump winning the election on 11/9 or 9/11. Dolly Parton being born on January 19th. You know, reminding us of the backwards 9/11 and the Tennessee fire. They found the thing of the book of Joel 1:19 that it talked about fire. Nebraska just played Tennessee in the bowl game and whatnot. And, of course, that game was synced up to the number 17. Tommy Armstrong Jr. didn't play. Riker Fife, number 17, played. I made tons of posts on the 17 in regards to the Nebraska Cornhuskers and how it synced up to the quarterbacks. Riker Fife even scored he rushed a touchdown when Nebraska had 17 points. Number 17 scores when they had 17 points, you know. Anyway, in my Big Lebowski posts, I talked a lot about, I actually talked about how it was synced up to the Cubs because John Goodman, in the movie King Ralph, he's in the Big Lebowski that has Donnie, who dies at the end, right? Reminding us of Donald Trump, Donnie and whatnot. But he's in the movie King Ralph that came out in the year 91. And in The Big Lebowski, the check is from September 11th of 1991. But anyway, in King Ralph, John Goodman's wearing the Cubs and Packers stuff. So possibly it's synced up to the Cubs and the Packers. I even mentioned, I made a post on the movie War Dogs this year as well. And I talked about how it was synced up to one of the Super Bowls where the Packers won. I can't even remember it all. Not going to go look. But David Packas, right? Packers. He lived in Miami. Like tons of stuff connected to Miami. So maybe in some weird way, all the Miami stuff is just literally connected to the Packers. Interesting too, though, today we got the story of the Minnesota Vikings. The person dropped down the banner that said divert, and they were fighting for the Dakota Access Pipeline, once again, the Native American theme, but he was wearing the Brett Favre jersey, and when you think of Brett Favre, most of the time you think of the Packers. I mean, maybe that's part of the joke. But he was also, you know, Atlanta Falcons. Somebody also pointed out to me that in the movie Something About Mary, that Brett Favre shows up. The movie's basically, it's set 13 years after 1985 when the Miami Dolphins were last in the Super Bowl. And remember Dan Marino, number 13, the guy who took them to this last Super Bowl and whatnot? 13 years later, though, and then it goes to Miami, and then she's like in love with Brett Favre, and he says he's in town for the Dolphins game. So, and then whatever, before she hooks up with Ben Stiller's character, she comes out and says, "You forgot your keys," right? And I talked about the key of David and whatnot in the very beginning of this video, which, man, I'm telling you, this video might be 3 hours long, but I'm going to put it all out. Hopefully, people will pay attention to what I'm saying. Anyway, possibly connecting it to the Patriots is that In the movie The Big Lebowski, you talk about Donnie dying. Donnie, played by Steve Buscemi, who was on the Snickers Brady Bunch commercial during Super Bowl. I wrote 48 in here, but it's Super Bowl 49. And I even talked about how Super Bowl 49 was super synced up to the death of Alice Brady, who died at the age of 88 in the beginning of June in, 2014? Or whatever, the year before the Patriots won the Super Bowl. Right around that same time, Dr. Dre bought the house of Tom Brady. It was the Brady Bunch house because he's married to Giselle Bundchen. And Dr. Dre equals 49. He was 49 years old, born on the 49th day of the year. Tons of other stuff, they were coming out with whatever it was, the NWA movie, and the Straight Outta Compton came out on 8/8 of 88. And then Alice on the Brady Bunch dies at the age of 88. It was synced up even to the death of James Brady, who got assassinated, or he got shot and paralyzed during the Ronald Reagan assassination attempt. And then he just died, can't even remember. 33 years later, highest degree in Scottish Rite, Freemasonry, and whatnot. So who knows, David Huddleston, the guy who died on The Big Lebowski, the whole reason I looked up The Big Lebowski, he died on the 215th day of the year. If you go from the date 7/5 to Super Bowl 51, it's 215 days. Dan Marino was on the 215th episode of The Simpsons, which I'll get to here. 8/2, also the day that leaves 151 days in the year. Dallas Cowboys equal 151. Jesus Christ equals 151. King Ralph came out on 2/15 of the year 1991. So interesting, 2/15. I'm actually going to end it here. The video is super long. Who knows? I'll finish it tomorrow night, that's for sure. But I'm getting really tired. I got to work. It's 4 in the morning, and I got to get up in about 4 hours. So, gonna get some sleep. I'll either make a part 2 or I'll just record it and then add it onto this. But peace. All right, so I'm back here. I want to keep covering the stuff in regards to Super Bowl 49 and the death of the Brady lady, Florence Henderson, just to show some more interesting connections. I talked about Steve Buscemi and the Snickers commercial, the Brady Bunch Snickers commercial during Super Bowl 49, and the death of Alice Brady and Dr. Dre buying the Brady Bunch house and whatnot. I looked up Snickers or whatever, and Snickers actually used to be called Marathon, not Snickers. And a while back I was mentioning how the town called Erling, Iowa, that I lived 13 miles from, ironically, it was where the first famous exorcism took place, and this year was the 88th anniversary of that exorcism taking place. Anyway, the reason it's so significant that Snickers was called Marathon is, well, for one, the fact that Alice from the Brady Bunch died at the age of 88, and then this year on Valentine's Day, which would have been Florence Henderson's 83rd birthday, it will be the 88th anniversary of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And, of course, Trump in Gematria equals 88, and it will also be the 88th year of the stock market crash on October 24th in 2017, which is interesting in regards to Arian Foster, because that's the day that he retired this year and whatnot. Anyway, in regards to this town, it was originally called Marthon, Iowa, but they changed the name to Erling, Iowa, because there was already a town called Marathon, Iowa. And the girl who got exorcised, she came from a town called Marathon, Wisconsin. So they're doing a whole marathon theme, and if you recall, we had the 5K race bombing in Chelsea or whatever this year, and it was super synced up to the Boston Marathon that happened in 2013, the same year as the bullying scandal that led up to Super Bowl 48. And I know that this is actually Super Bowl 49, but Super Bowl 48 was just as important, connecting to the Miami Dolphins and whatnot. And also in regards to exorcisms and whatnot, remember the Boston Marathon was at 666 Boylston Street. Anyway, I mentioned, and I'll leave a link in the description of this video as well, it's like an hour long, but the death of Sam Foltz and Mike Sadler, the Michigan State player. Mike Sadler was born in Stamford, Connecticut. That's also where Gene Wilder died. Gene Wilder was connected to the University of Iowa, the color purple, all kinds of stuff in regards to Prince. Talked about Christopher Lloyd being from there, Doc Brown, and Back to the Future. But Stamford, Connecticut is also where the first ever marathon was held in the U.S. And a marathon is 26 miles. The word God equals 26, so I think that's part of the reason why it's so interesting. It's synced up to God and exorcisms. And I even talked about how it tied into the Minnesota Vikings for the fact that at US Bank Stadium, the first sporting event that was there was the team Chelsea, the soccer team or whatever, and they were called Chelsea, and then we had the Chelsea Trash Bomb, and Chelsea played in their stadium is called Stamford Bridge and whatnot. A whole bunch of stuff in regards to it. So Snickers, for whatever the reason, super significant. I wonder if there'll be a significant Snickers commercial coming up soon or something like that. In regards to all of this, stem back to Deflategate as well. And I said that Florence Henderson, her name equals, or Carol Brady equals 45 in Gematria. And let's see here. In Deflategate, the Patriots scored 45 points. Remember, Miami equals 45. And there's all these parallels to Miami from the Colts. So possibly they are with this Deflategate thing. They're showing us the Dolphins, or possibly the Dolphins are showing us the Patriots. You know, it's kind of this interrelated thing. But in week 17, the Patriots won with 35 points here. And it's interesting because they also finished the season 14-2. Miami Dolphins, the big way, equals 142. And if you write out 35 as a word, or 35 as words, it equals 142. Tom Brady, though, in Gematria equals 35. And this game was even 35 days before the Super Bowl. So, I don't know what to think. 14-2. Reminds you of the Miami Dolphins. Florence Henderson, also, her birthday being Valentine's Day, which is 14/2. A lot like 142. Wolverines equals 142. Think about Tom Brady, the Michigan Wolverines. The Wolverines just lost in the Orange Bowl in Miami. Remember, too, in Gematria, there's all kinds of 98s. Brady Bunch equals 98. Snickers 98. Michigan Wolverines, the small way, equals 98. Jim Harbaugh 98. Tom Brady 98. Became the starter at Michigan in the year 98. Lupercalia equals 98. The celebration and sacrifice of a wolf. The second day of that celebration is Valentine's Day. So who knows? Like I said, it's interrelated. But interesting that this year's Valentine's will be the 88th anniversary of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, connecting it to Chicago. And then think about the Alton Sterling stuff I showed, and the connections with Back to the Future in Miami and Chicago. Also, on Wikipedia, look what they write about Snickers on Wikipedia. The 1984 Olympics, which just reminds me of the 1984 season when the Dolphins went to the Super Bowl last time, you know, with Dan Marino. Also, well, what in the world? Also, later on in here, the first thing that they mention in regards to American football is a commercial about, what is it here? An American football team showing off his new tattoo of the team's logo on his back to his teammates. He then shows it to his head coach, who after complimenting the tattoo immediately tells him that he's been traded to Miami. And if you go and watch that commercial, the guy has a big, like, Detroit Lions looking logo on his back, and then he gets traded to Miami. And there's a lot of Detroit Lions stuff. I'm not exactly sure. I talked about it with the weird foreshadowing of my brother, but it possibly could just be synced up to the reason why Ndamukong Suh is at the Miami Dolphins or something along the lines of that. But as we move along, I'll show you some interesting things in regards to my name being Dan and how, Daniel in the Lion's Den, and there's just been all kinds of stuff that seems to be connected to Jesus and whatnot. So a whole lot of, biblical revelation type things going on. I also pointed out, though, that it does mention the Kansas City Chiefs down here. The one where they paint the field chefs and not chiefs or whatever. And then, of course, the Chiefs are the Native American team. And I talked about this big Native American theme. That commercial was also all about a tattoo. Tattoo equals 91. Detroit equals 91. Also, this is the Lions head coach on Wikipedia. And there's tons of things. Almost everything you look up, when you look it up, they change it instantly. If someone dies, they make sure they put that on there. I mean, it always seems updated. And, Masonic Wikipedia, I've talked about that multiple times. They, write the stories for these people on there. You can't change anything. So just interesting that the Detroit Lions coach on Wikipedia is wearing his Colts stuff, and he hasn't even been a coach with the Colts since 2011. It seems pretty fishy, and no, I did not do that on purpose. Wikipedia also tells us that the Lions' uniforms were changed in the year 48 by this guy, Bo McMillan, and he was born on, I keep screwing that up, but he was born on January 12th, a lot like 112, Super Bowl. Played in Houston, that equals 112. Says that he coached the Eagles until the year 51, Super Bowl 51, and he was the GM of the Lions until the year 51. And, whatever, I've talked a lot about how Philadelphia is synced up. Philadelphia is synced up to the Key of David. They also mention about Snickers on the Wikipedia page. They even talk about Henry VIII and a Viking. I thought was interesting. And then later on, they talk about Super Bowl XLI on February 4th, 2007. That's when the Colts won the Super Bowl. So just interesting, all that stuff on Snickers in regards to stuff that I've been talking about. So let's move on here. So in this post, a weird thing happened to me again. I was sitting there just doing some little research or whatever, and I was sort of rewatching Ace Ventura, kind of listening to it while I was looking up some stuff. And I saw this article about Gary Shandling on Yahoo. And we also had the death of Carrie Fisher here, and then the actor from Everybody Hates Chris. And I thought, that's interesting. This guy died, a long time ago, clear back in March. And I thought, why in the world are they bringing this guy's story back up? And why is it, a headline story bigger than these other ones that have just happened, Anyway, so I looked this guy up. And, of course, the last movie that he was in was The Jungle Book. And that is the movie that my daughter was watching on TV. So I thought, what? That's pretty weird. How does that happen, And anyway, since I was looking up stuff about Super Bowl 51 and I was watching Ace Ventura a little bit, I thought I'll take this guy's birthday and I'll see how close it is to the Super Bowl, or how many days away it is. And it just so happened to be 318 days. This big number that we've been talking about a whole lot, talked about how in the New Testament Jesus' second coming is mentioned 318 times. Talked about how Prince Charles was born on the 318th day of the year in a non-leap year. He was married to Princess Diana, who died on August 31st, 31/8. It's even a number connected to the backwards pi. But something I never noticed, and when I saw this, 318, I noticed that it was also 10 months, 12 days. And remember, Houston beat the Bengals and won the division with a score of 10-12. And then the Dolphins lost to Seattle on the first game of the season, 10-12. And of course, too, Super Bowl 48 when the Seahawks won, that was super connected to Neptune, who is also the equivalent of Poseidon, the ruler of the sea, of earthquakes, and also of horses. And we had Philip Seymour Hoffman die. Philip is a guy who loves horses. That if you look up the etymology of the name Philip, there was all kinds of stuff going on with that story. Just tons of stuff connected to the sea and Neptune and the number 8. So I remembered that I had a post about Gary Shandling from whenever he died. I just made a small post about it. And interesting, when I go to it, I wrote, so I literally just posted about the Japan killing 333 whales story. I mentioned 11/29. It was the 333rd day of the year last year. And the next article that I looked at was the death of Gary Shandling. And, whatever. He was born on 11/29, 333rd day of the year, a number important to Israel. It was the day that Israel became recognized on a 33-member vote on the 333rd day of the year. He died 3 months, 24 days after his 66th birthday on 3/24. I also talked about him, CNN giving us this video about him on David Letterman, and David Letterman looking like the bald Santa. And, it was just right around Christmas time we're getting all these stories. So anyway, the reason that I thought it was interesting is because I mentioned this 333 whales story. And whales reminds me of the sea. It also reminds me of the South Park episode. And these people love to code things into movies and films and everything else. So anyway, I looked up South Park because I remember an episode that's super connected to whales and dolphins and whatnot. And it's, just because I used to love the show a whole lot. And when I looked this episode, so this South Park episode just so happens to be episode 192, which is super interesting. Indianapolis Colts equal 192, NFL, Obama, all of the stuff that I mentioned previously with 192. And what's funny about this episode is that Japan comes and kills the Miami Dolphins because America convinced Japan to think that dolphins and whales were responsible for the atomic bombings. And just think about all the World War symbolism they've been foreshadowing as well, especially with Donald Trump. Also, before I even knew Gematria, I had this article saved about 228 dead dolphins found along the East Coast in 2013. And why I saved this article, who knows? I knew that it was going to come back up sometime in my life. I have a bunch of articles saved even before I knew Gematria. But this one, for some reason, when I started thinking about the dolphins, I thought, interesting, let's look at this story again, because I didn't know Gematria at the time, and, death equals 228. And then we get a story about 228 dead dolphins. And look when the story came out on CNN. August 22nd, 22/8. A story about 228 dead dolphins on the East Coast. And this was the year of the dolphin bullying scandal. And also, the NFL season leading up to Super Bowl 48. Look at the numbers in the story, too. They tell you the 228, but they say in Virginia alone, at least 164 dead dolphins have been found this year. And, if you go from August 22nd, when this story came out, to Super Bowl 48, it's a span of 164 days. You know, 164 dead in Virginia, 164 days. This story was, you know, obviously something to do with the ocean and synced up to the Seahawks. So it just makes me wonder if they're going to switch the roles, and that's why the Dolphins lost to the Seahawks 10-12 on the first game of the season. And then they were hooking us up by knocking out the Colts and the Vikings, and then Houston winning their division with a score of 10-12. Also, though, just before we got this article, and I think this is the reason why I remember this story so much. So just before we got this article about the Dolphins dying on the East Coast, we got a story about a new star in the constellation Delphinus, which is the dolphin. And we also got a story about the 1972 Miami Dolphins, the team that went undefeated, how they got to go to the White House and be honored by Barack Obama. And then we get the story about the dead Dolphins, and then we get the Dolphins bullying scandal. If you go from the day that the 72 Dolphins went to the White House, and you go 72 days later, that was the day that Richie Incognito got suspended after the Bengals game. And Boolean gematria equals 72. The 72 Dolphins, 72 days after they visit the White House. In regards to Donald Trump's assassination, and I talked about how there's something special connected to all of the Ronald Reagan foreshadowing. And also William McKinley, another assassinated president in Buffalo. William McKinley equals 72. President Trump equals 72. The Ronald Reagan assassination attempt was by John Hinckley Jr. That equals 72, and he did it because of the writings of Arthur Brimmer, who tried to assassinate George Wallace in the year 1972. Lots of 72 stuff, so just interesting in regards to the 72 Dolphins. Dolphins equal 45. Trump's going to be the 45th president. Also, something that really stuck out to me in regards to this story and how it connects to my life. So the Gary Shandling guy, when I looked up his movies, it also talked about this movie that he starred in with Warren Beatty. And I talked about how, in the very beginning of this video, I talked about there's something to do with Carrie Fisher's first movie ever. It was called Shampoo, and it starred Warren Beatty, or however you say that guy's name. But the only movie that he's in with Gary Shandling just so happens to be called Town and Country, which is very odd because, you know, I talked about how I had quit my old job and whatever, I didn't have any money, and I just went to the gas station in town. The gas station in town is literally called Town and Country. And Warren Beatty, his name equals 95 in gematria. My name equals 95 in gematria. And what's even weirder, so when you read through here, you find out this was his last film for 15 years before he starred in the movie called Rules Don't Apply in November 2016. And if you look up this movie, it just so happened to premiere on my 34th birthday, November 10th, 2016. You know, his last movie was, it's named the same as the place that I just got a job at. And then his newest movie, he wasn't in a movie for 15 years, and it just so happens to come out on my birthday. And then it also was released fully in the United States on November 23rd, which is my girlfriend's birthday. I mean, that's some pretty weird stuff. Her name equals 152, just like Super Bowl LI, you know? All syncing up to the Super Bowl. This is the movie that I was talking about, too, that Warren Beatty's in. And they had the Chris Rock remake, too, Down to Earth. And it's all about him playing for the Los Angeles Rams, and he dies, and he has to get a new body or whatever. Just super interesting. Everything that I've talked about. Even in the Chris Rock version, you know, he becomes the rich white guy, and the rich white guy's name is Charles Wellington III, which reminds me a lot of Prince Charles, who will become King Charles III, which I have covered extensively over the last, year and a half, you know. And there was also another remake of this movie that was called Here Comes Mr. Jordan, and in regards to all of this and how it's intertwined, Philadelphia used to be the capital of the country Jordan until the year 106 AD. It was later destroyed by earthquakes. And I talked about how it's synced up to Michael Jordan, but the Fresh Prince also comes from Philadelphia. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, born and raised in Philadelphia. The head angel on the movie Down to Earth, his name's even King. You know, just interesting, all the royalty symbolism, the Rams. I shared something that happened to me at work, too. So I was at work, and this little kid came in by himself wearing a Minnesota Vikings coat, and he just bought just a candy bar, and when I looked at the clock on the register, it said $3.18, and then his total came up to $1.38, and then after he left, I noticed that the receipt paper was getting low, and I bent down to look at the box or whatever, and I noticed on the box that it said 318 times HI. That's what the paper's called, or the size of the paper. You know, just, that's pretty strange. All the 318 that I've mentioned in tons of previous videos. I mean, I guess 318 just wanted to say hi. You know, I don't really know. Pretty strange stuff. The Vikings kid. So I went and watched that episode with Dan Marino and The Simpsons, because The Simpsons, I also covered how they had predicted Donald Trump to win the presidency, and it was all about the Native American theme that I talked about as well, and the Indians were in the World Series. But previously I had said it's the 215th episode, which it is, but I never noticed it's season 10, episode 12. Once again, you know, that 10-12, syncing up to Seattle and syncing up to Houston's final win. The episode aired on January 31st, 1999, 131. Super Bowl equals 131. It was actually the exact day that the Super Bowl that year was even played. It was the Broncos versus the Atlanta Falcons, which is interesting in regards to the death of Keon Carpenter, who is connected to the Atlanta Falcons. Anyway, in this episode, so Dan Marino's in the episode, Troy Aikman's in the episode. Oh, there's some other guy, I'll talk about him in a second, I can't remember what his name is. But basically all Dan Marino does is he throws a pass to Bart, and then Homer intercepts it. And they're all basically going to the Super Bowl, and then they get sold counterfeit tickets. So they try to sneak into the Super Bowl. They end up all getting put in jail. And then Dolly Parton, of all people, hooks them up and gets them out of jail. And we've covered Dolly Parton like crazy, like I said, with the Book of Joel and her song Jolene, and Dolly the sheep, the cloned sheep, and Donald Trump in the sheep commercial, the mattress sheep commercial with the 11 and the 9 on it, and he wins the election on 11-9. I talked about Dolly Parton singing I Will Always Love You, you know, and that's an original by her, not Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston synced up to Super Bowl 48, and also this year's Super Bowl, because Bobby Brown will turn 48 on that day. Tons and tons of stuff going on with it, but Dolly Parton in Gematria equals the same as Super Bowl LI, 53, 152, English Gematria, 912. Also, in regards to Whitney Houston and the movie The Bodyguard, where that song is pretty much famous from, it has Kevin Costner in it. Kevin Costner is the whole movie, or whatever, he wasn't there to stop the Ronald Reagan assassination attempt and whatever. You know, that's part of the movie. It just goes along with everything we've talked about. Donald Trump equals 48. But Kevin Costner, like I said, plays Jim Garrison in the movie JFK, and that guy is originally from Denison, Iowa, where Yellow Smoke Park is. I talked about Prince's Yellow Cloud guitar, Brandon Scherf playing with the Washington Redskins. And what's really funny is, from my childhood, when you leave my town and you go up Highway 30 to go to this town, you go to Dow City, Arion, and then it's Denison. And when you get into Denison, when you're coming around the corner, there's this giant, dome, cement dome building, and it always had this little metal piece on the top. And my whole life, we have joked about how that was the Dolly Parton booby, because I don't know, even when I was a little kid, we always thought Dolly Parton had breast cancer and only had one boob, and that was like just some stupid joke. And I'd swear, like, you could ask anybody I know, they still call it that. We call it the Dolly Parton boobie. And, but the nipples broke off now. So it's just very strange that that's even part of this town, and it's synced up to, I Will Always Love You, and Whitney Houston, and Kevin Costner, Brandon Scherf, the Washington Redskin. In the 1972 Dolphins, they beat the Redskins in the Super Bowl. It made me want to look up people from Denison, too. It's not even a very big town, but there's actually a decent amount of famous people or notable people from this town. And, Donna Reed, the famous actor, is one of them. The only reason I even know of her is because of the only movie theater in town was called that when I was a kid. And I also thought it was interesting that Rob Zombie says, other than always saying ow in every song, he sings about Donna Reed, eats a dollar bill or whatever. Who knows? Anyway, this is one of the guys, I guess he played in the NFL, and look what he played. He played for the Rams, and he was born on July 5th. And all of this I talked about goes back to the death of Kyle Callaway, the former Buffalo Bill and Iowa Hawkeye player who died in Vail, Arizona. And Vail, Iowa is the next town. Yellow Smoke Park is here, Denison, Iowa here, and Vail, Iowa is over here. It's like Yellow Smoke Park is in between there. I mean, even went to college at Wisconsin, which is super connected because that's where Sam Foltz and Mike Sadler died. It's where J.J. Watt is from, the Houston Texan who got hurt. Just a whole lot of stuff. Like I said, have to see the previous videos. I don't want to keep explaining it. He also talks about this guy right here, L.M. Shaw. I guess he was one of the candidates he was the Republican nominee for president in the year 1908, the last time the Cubs won the World Series. Look at his birthday. November 2nd, 11/2 of 1848, right? The Indians hadn't won since 1948. The 112th World Series came to an end on 11/2. I even made a video about on November 2nd, I think it was, or November 1st, one of them days, there was a story about a police officer shootings in Des Moines, Iowa, that was right next to where I used to live in the Merle Hay Mall. And Merle Hay was the first guy to die in World War I. And then a guy from Iowa was also the first guy to die in World War II. But anyway, I worked at Burger King, that equals 112, and right across the street was the bar called the 1908 Drought Bar. And there was other stuff of that as well. I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's not the first time that's happened. There's been lots of media stories that I'm telling you, for some weird reason, I think they were meant for me to see to figure out the little puzzle that is being left behind. This guy is a guy to watch out for, too, because if he's connected to the World Series that way, I find it interesting his death day of March 28th, 1932. This is, March 28 is 51 days after Super Bowl 51. And the year 32, the Dolphins haven't been to the Super Bowl in 32 years. This guy also was the 17th governor of Iowa. And later on, I'll mention a lot more about 17, but I did mention a little bit in the beginning about Dan Marino playing for 17 seasons, and this will be 17 years after his last game. Tannehill wears number 17. 17th governor of Iowa. By the way, Iowa and gematria equals 48. This guy boarded 48. It also says that was the 43rd United States Secretary of Treasury. So 43 Dolphins equals 43 the small way. So I mean, who knows? If the Dolphins go to the Super Bowl, remember all of this. And possibly they're just manipulating my mind and going to make me look stupid or something. But I've been showing this stuff previously, and it's synced up to, at least who's going to be in it. But once again, a lot of people think they flipped the script. Maybe there's some weird thing that I'm not seeing, and I've said that before. So anyway, as I was looking up this town again, because I just found it interesting, and I never knew there was a Freemason lodge there. I thought there's got to be one there because it's probably one of the bigger towns, or probably the biggest town in Crawford County or whatever. And it said there was these 2 lodges here. And the funny thing is that this one right here, I actually do know 2 people who are in it. I don't ever talk to them anymore, but I do know who they are, and I went to high school with them, and their names have identical gematria, 55 and 145. And on Facebook it says they're both 32nd degree Freemasons. So just super interesting how they have identical gematria and talk about Freemasonry all the time. And also, my town, who killed the last keeper of the sacred pole, the Omaha Indians, they were going to come and kill the whole town, but they got saved because the Freemasons dressed up in their Freemasonic outfits, and they went outside and did signals. And in the article, it says that by some force, the Omaha people knew Masonic symbols and believed them that they didn't really kill him, and they didn't kill the whole town. Now, just think about that. There's more to it, there's more than I understand. I also pointed out that Denison, the town, was laid out in the year 56, and Denison, Iowa equals 56. Dunlap equals 68, and they killed Yellow Smoke in the year 68. So back to the Dan Marino Simpsons episode. When I searched the episode, look at the first 2 things that came up in the search. This one, January 12th of 2013. Interesting because later that year was the bullying scandal and the 72 Dolphins going to the White House and whatnot. January 12th, 112, like Houston. The next one, September 12th, 2014, 912, like Super Bowl LI, like all the Alan Thicke stuff, weird stuff. Them 2 articles would pop up. This episode, then, it aired the same day as Super Bowl 33, and it was also the night that Family Guy premiered. The very first episode of Family Guy also came out on this night. So I thought, let's look up the 10th season, episode 12 of Family Guy, just like this was the 10th season, episode 12 of The Simpsons. And they even they make a joke about asking Prince William when he thinks the Queen will die. I've been talking about all of the royal stuff like crazy. Pretty interesting. So in that Simpsons episode, the football players were Rosie Greer, Troy Aikman, and Dan Marino. And what's weird? I could possibly be wrong, or maybe it was some type of joke or something, but I swear that Troy Aikman's grandparents even live in Denison, Iowa, or something like that. They live somewhere around here. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but just pretty interesting. There is also a Denison, Texas, and whatever. That's like the one that will pop up the most in a search of Denison. But anyway, this guy, Rosie Greer, he played for the Rams and the Giants. And then, of course, Troy Aikman, a reference to the Cowboys. But this guy, his real name is Roosevelt. Roosevelt equals 131, just like Super Bowl. After his football career, he went on to be a bodyguard for RFK, and he was even the guy who took control of the gun, but he didn't stop the killing, What are the odds of that? He's the bodyguard. I'm talking about Denison, Iowa, and Kevin Costner, the movie The Bodyguard, the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. And then I talked about how it makes me think of the Patriots and James Brady dying and the death of Alice Brady. And then this year we got the death of Florence Henderson, Cindy Brady, or whatever her name was, Carol Brady. But like I said, in Deflategate they had 45 points, and Carol Brady equals 45, just like Miami. It could all just be some weird way syncing up to Miami, or all this Miami stuff is just some weird way. Could be possibly showing us the Patriots, unfortunately. The Dolphins coach I threw in here too. Adam Gase. His name equals 51 in Gematria, like Super Bowl 51. It's also 306 in English Gematria. Anything that's 51 in simple Gematria always equals 306 English Gematria, which is interesting because the 306 prime number is 2017. The Dolphins coach was also the offensive coordinator for the Broncos when they lost to the Seahawks in Super Bowl 48. So, the very next day, on December 29th, I got home from work, and I was listening to the Gematria Effect, like I said, and I was looking stuff up because for some reason, something sparked my brain, and I thought, everyone's talking about flipping the script and whatnot, and I thought, what about the movie Flipper with the dolphin in it? And, I thought, I don't know, I'll start looking up some stuff with Flipper. And before I did that, for some reason, I looked up the band Flipper. And at the exact moment, I was looking at this album, but the exact moment I read the word truth, Zach on his show said the word truth. And most people would think nothing of that, but I'm telling you, I've been following these weird coincidence things that happened to me, and they seem to follow the pattern or whatever. He said the word truth. I thought, how in the world he said the word truth exactly was when I was reading the word truth. So then I looked over here and I noticed the album came out on January 12th, 1993, 112. And there is all kinds of stuff coming up here. Just tons of weird stuff. So I remembered that on the In Utero album of Nirvana, which is interesting because Zach lives in Seattle and whatnot, and Nirvana, the Seattle band. But on the inside cover, if you invert it, it has Kurt Cobain wearing this flipper shirt, and when you flip it, it looks like 9/11 and an airplane. And remember all of the 9/11 stuff that I've mentioned, the book of Joel being found, or the page of Joel being found, Joel 119, Dolly Parton born on January 19th, Donald Trump being elected on 11/9, Hillary Clinton collapsing on 9/11. That same day, we also had a plane crash in Reno, Nevada, and that is where Donald Trump also supposedly was threatened or whatever. And that's also where Colin Kaepernick went to college. He went to the University of Nevada, or Reno, or whatever. University of Nevada, that's at Reno. They're called the Wolf Pack. Anyway, as I'm looking this stuff up about Nirvana, I have the TV. My daughter was sleeping in the bed. I'm sitting right here. My laptop's on the bed. And my daughter was sleeping right behind the laptop. And I had the TV on the channel Lithium because she likes to listen to rock and roll when she goes to bed. Not always, but sometimes. And that night she wanted to listen to rock and roll. So I turned it on and I turned down the lights, whatever, so she would fall asleep, and it usually works. And I'm sitting there, and of course it is Lithium, so you got to expect at least some Nirvana songs and whatnot. But right when I typed Kurt Cobain, and I'm talking about when I typed it on Wikipedia, I was searching Kurt Cobain again just to look him up. And right when I typed Kurt Cobain, the song Come As You Are came on the channel or whatever. And, of course, I typed in Come As You Are in Gematria, it equals 51. I also noticed that Come As You Are is track number 3 on Nevermind, and this May the Truth Be Known song is also on track 3. Just reminds me of a 33. And what's funny, even funnier, so I'm just talking about this shirt, right? The 9/11 shirt with the flipper. Kurt Cobain, it was on the In Utero album on the inside cover or whatever. He also wore it on Saturday Night Live, and the only music video he wore it for was Come As You Are. What are the odds? And that song comes on like instantly afterward, right as I type in Kurt Cobain. What's even funnier and weird, and I just noticed this as I was making this video, I just talked about the Gary Shandling stuff and the 333 whales. Well, on this old post on March 24th, later on in this post, it was just kind of a random post. I even talked about O.J. Simpson's knife was reportedly found, and Kurt Cobain's suicide gun was unveiled. You know? That's pretty weird. I even mentioned Kurt Cobain in this post, and then it just starts coming up like crazy. I've covered Kurt Cobain a whole lot. I talked about Weird Al in the Weird Al Smells Like Nirvana video, and he has Kurt Cobain's head blowing up and stuff. But a lot of the stuff that I was talking about with Kurt Cobain stemmed back to love and Valentine's references. You know, there's just all kinds of them. Courtney Love, heart-shaped box, Love Buzz. He died on April 5th, or 4/5 or 5/4. Valentine's, the 45th day of the year. The word love equals 54. He died 45 days after his birthday on 4/5. Valentine's equals 67. He was born in the year 67. He's also born on February 20th, which is the 51st day of the year. His name with the K exception also equals 51. And then, like I said, I was talking about the Dolphins and the Seahawks, and that's where all of this stuff was led up from that 10-12 score. Listening to Zach's show, he lives in Seattle. Look at this in Nirvana, though. Kurt Donald Cobain, 65. Christ the Novoselic, 65. Born in the year 65. Dave Grohl equals 65. Foo Fighters equals 65. Dave Grohl was born on January 14th, 114. Kurt Cobain equals 114. Novoselic equals 114. Just his name in general, Christ, or Christ, you know, play on words. He also later went on to play with the band Flipper on their final album titled Love. You know, it just blows me away. And look what he even talks about. It talks about the album has been referred to as an evil twin to the accompanying live album Fight, which was recorded live during the band's performances in Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. Both places that Zachary K. Hubbard is connected to. I also started thinking about a whole bunch of other stuff, and they just made that Kurt Cobain movie or whatever that was put out, and I can't even remember, something to do with Frances Bean, his daughter, and her name Frances, and then we had, you know, there's all kinds of Francis stuff going on, even the Paris, France attack and whatnot. San Francisco is named after St. Francis of Assisi, which is also who Pope Francis is named after. Carrie Frances Fisher, Mary Frances Reynolds, her mom. And then Flipper being from San Francisco, it made me think of Colin Kaepernick and the national anthem stuff. And I even talked about how Sam Houston got in a fight and his lawyer ended up being Francis Scott Key. And then I started thinking, it sounds a lot like Francis Got Key, Francis Scott Key, and I thought, is that really what it's all about? Maybe France has got the key too, you know, France and the Bavarian Illuminati, Francis Scott Key, or Pope Francis got the key, and that's why his trip to Philadelphia was so important because of, you know, the mention of the Church of Philadelphia in Revelation 7, and how it's connected to the Key of David. And keep in mind, I made this post, and then the very next day, Keon Carpenter died. And what's really weird, though, like I said this in the beginning of the video, if you go and look up the Key of David, people talk about how it's connected to things like this happening, that are happening to me on a daily basis, where basically it unlocks something. You can see more and understand more of what is of the truth, or maybe the false truth, or whatever, you know, just interesting if you read a little bit about it, or what people mention about it, I guess. Pennsylvania also equals 152 at Gematria, like Super Bowl LI. Philadelphia equals 65, just like Miami, Florida. So I went and watched the Come As You Are video, and look at the ad that pops up when I'm watching it. Big Jesus, Lock and Key Live. What are the odds of that? You know, I didn't even type it in. I didn't type it in anywhere in a search engine. Nothing to do, well, maybe I typed in Key of David. But what are the odds I'm watching the Come As You Are video and this ad pops up? Big Jesus, Lock and Key. So I guess I'm just backtracking too, so it's kind of hard to remember some of the stuff and exactly how it happened. I'm just reading what I wrote and trying to remember it all. But it says, I know it's the Lithium channel, but it's only been an hour, and now The Man Who Sold the World is playing, the Nirvana version. And I talked about this song a while back, how there was some strange day where, I can't even remember it all, but I went to band practice, and on the way there, I was giving our drummer a ride there, or our guitarist and singer a ride there because he's blind or whatever. He's legally blind, he can't drive. And I've known him for probably 15 years, like since he was in junior high. But anyway, he was saying something about we should add the song The Man Who Sold the World to our set list. And then when we got there, the drummer just randomly said something about, we should add that song The Man Who Sold the World to our set list. And I was like, did you tell him about that? And he's like, no, I didn't say a word, And then, just weird. Like, everybody was thinking of The Man Who Sold the World on the same day. And when I got in the car on the way home, the first song I turned the radio on was The Man Who Sold the World. And I made a post on it, but the video is way better. But I can't even remember it all. Like I said, I'll leave that link in the description. The date that it happened was September 30th, a date numerology of 65. Interesting how all of that syncs up to Nirvana. So also, as I was doing this that night, I was reading about the Key of David, and my internet just randomly disconnected. No idea. My internet just completely disconnected. And I was like, I bet that has something to do with what's going on tonight, all this crazy stuff. And I looked at the clock, and the clock said 11:18. And I wrote it down, and then as I was researching, I noticed that The Man Who Sold the World and the Nirvana Unplugged in New York was actually recorded on November 18th, a lot like 11/18 of the year 93. And this happened, The Man Who Sold the World stuff happened on 9/30, take out the 0, 93. 93 is the number for Saturn, the keeper of time, There's definitely something bigger in the world. So also I looked at the posts around the time that I posted this, and I noticed that I talked about the Bengals beat the Dolphins 22-7, and I made a little preview down here, Dolphins versus Bengals. This was the only game that I even talked about in the NFL all season. For whatever the reason, I was really into the baseball and some of the college, but I didn't really talk that much or even watch that much NFL. And one of the only posts I had on the NFL was the Dolphins versus the Bengals. The other one was the Colts versus the Texans. And that game went to overtime 23-23. Think about Jay Ajayi being 23 years old, and he wears number 23, and Arian Foster retiring, and he's known for wearing the number 23. This game was also the first time that the Dolphins played the Bengals since the bullying scandal with Richie Incognito. After he got suspended after that game. This is the first time the Dolphins have played them since. They were both on Thursday night as well. Thursday in Gematria equals 35. Remember, if you write out 35, it equals 142, like Miami Dolphins. Here's the Texas one. I talked about the 23-23. I can't even remember what happened. There was something in the World Series, too. I think number 23 hit a home run, and the game was 1-0, and that was the end of the game or whatever. A bunch of 23 on this day when the Colts played the Texans. I even talked about how they kept zooming in on Frank Gore, number 23 for the Indianapolis Colts, and he's from Miami. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'm sure there was something I should have talked about in them. In the Bengals-Dolphins post, I posted this here. If Miami loses, they'll be 16-6. 166 equals 95 and 257. Thursday night football equals 95, 257. September 29th equals 95, 275. And the Dolphins they did lose, and they became 16-6. But if you remember in the beginning of this video, I talked about all of the 166 stuff. Talked about this guy right here, born on the 166th day of the year. I talked about how Donald Trump's 70th birthday this year was on the 166th day of the year. Miami Dolphins equals 70. Pope Francis's 1,189th day of the year was that day. Or I mean his 1,189th day as being the Pope. This guy's birthday also just so happens to be 131 days after the Super Bowl will be played. Super Bowl equals 131. I didn't know what 166 really meant, so I went to Zach's blog because, you know, lots of different numbers you can look and see what they might be connected to. And the first one that pops up in regards to 166, he's talking about the movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise and how they foreshadowed the last Super Bowl is in 2017. And when he's at that football field, the little drone thing that's going crazy or whatever is drone number 166. Can't remember what else I was going to talk about that, but just interesting, you know, the supposedly foreshadowing the last Super Bowl in 2017, and then that number 166 pops up. I think maybe I was just talking about how in that post he was talking about it connecting to Super Bowl 48, and I'm saying that Super Bowl 48 is connected to Super Bowl 51. In regards to 166, it just started coming up everywhere. Sam Houston, he beat up William Stanberry. Stanberry died 166 days after his 84th birthday. And his name equals 84. He dies age 84. A while back, I kept mentioning the date of May 13th. They were showing me May 13th like crazy after copyright claiming my Prince videos. Tons of stuff with that. I'll try to find them and leave a link to that as well. May 13th equals 166. I also noticed that if you go 166 days before the Super Bowl, it's August 23rd, which is, you know, the 235th day, the date that was synced up to the Donald Trump on the assassination Illuminati card and whatnot. 238 was also a number connected to Alton Sterling and Philando Castile. I can't remember it all. Like Baton Rouge, CNN made sure we knew that the population was 238,000. I think CNN gave us a 2-minute 38 clip of the Philando Castile stuff or something like that. Alton Sterling equals 166 in Gematria. Also, you know, May 13th equals 166. Notice that sometimes 166 days is 5 months, 13 days. I talked about this a lot in regards to the royal family as well. And the death of Prince. May 13th was the 134th day this year. King Charles III equals 134. Also, Twin Towers equals 166. Pretty interesting. All the 9/11 symbolism, and then Twin Towers equals 166. Talked about my uncle who gave me the jersey, and I found out at the gold slipper that equals 166. Barney Murphy, he gave it to me, equals 166. Talked about my other uncle, 166. Thirteenth pick equals 166. You know, the Dolphins had the 13th pick in the draft this year. And then he posted the Bong video or picture 13 minutes before the draft, and then he moved back and the Dolphins picked him up. The 23rd prime is 83. Football equals 83. If you add 83 plus 83, it equals 166. Key of David. I know I mentioned all this stuff before, so I'm going to skip over it. Key of David, though, equals 102 in simple gematria. If you write out 102, it equals 166. Cowboys equal 122, or 102. Ezekiel Elliott equals 166. And there's something more to it. I don't know enough about the stories in the Bible, but there's something very significant to Ezekiel and how it syncs up to the Daniel and the Lion's Den or the tribe of Dan. I can't remember. I needed to do more research into it, but I know there's something more that, you know, I'm missing with that. Palmetto Amtrak equals 166. And the reason I even brought this one up was because it was in my notes, and the first service just so happened to be on the 166th day of the year, and then even lists my birthday on here, which would have been my 14th birthday, I believe. And the reason this was significant was because this train wreck actually was showing us who was going to win the NBA Finals this year, because it was going to Savannah, Georgia, and the Cavaliers picked up Jordan McRae just before this or whatever, and he's from Savannah, Georgia. Notice his birthday too, March 28th, 51 days after Super Bowl 51, and he's age 25. The Super Bowl is going to be played on 2/5. This train wreck also happened on 4/3, April 3rd. Dolphins equal 43. Talked about how it's connected to Merle Haggard and Bam Margera. It was even connected to the other train wreck that we got in Kansas on Pi Day, Steph Curry's birthday. I mean, I know it's a lot to take in, you know. This guy even went to Tennessee for college. There's super connected. There's a big connection between the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and that's why they played Tennessee, and they had the Tennessee Fires. I also noticed John Benet Ramsey equals 166. We've been getting stories in regards to her yet again. St. Louis Rams equals 166. Also, June 14th this year was the 166th day of the year. In a non-leap year, June 15th is the 166th day of the year. And June 16th can be written 16/6. So all three of these days are interesting in regards to 166. And right around this time is when we got the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting. It was also around the time that we got the story of the boy being ate by the alligator at Disneyland or whatever. Disney World, I can't remember which one it was. Also to point out, in regards to the Lions, Jonathan the Lion was a lion at the Houston Zoo who died this year. Jonathan the Lion equals 166. Houston Zoo equals 51. Super Bowl 51 being played in Houston. The Lions also beat the Colts in Week 1, 39-35. There's also this story on 12-10 or 10/12, syncing up to what I was talking about with Dan Marino and The Simpsons. It's 29 degrees, 29 dead, 166 hurt. Think about it too. Turkey, the key symbolism. There's been lots of stuff to Thanksgiving, and I'm starting to wonder if all of that was just connected because of the word key in there. That was the key of turkey, you know. I even made a bunch of stuff in regards to Sylvester Stallone and Apollo Creed in the movie Rocky and whatnot. I mean, Carl Weathers, and how it's synced up to Thanksgiving, and it reminds us of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is where they mention the key of David in the Bible. A whole lot of stuff, you know. Sylvester Stallone was even at Nice, France, when that attack happened. The picture they took of him made him look like the Statue of Liberty. Anyway, in regards to this story, 29 degrees, 29 dead, football equals 29. Happened in Istanbul at a football game. Istanbul equals 112. Houston equals 112. The emergency dialing code there, 112. It was a football match in a league called the Super League, LIG. Reminds us a lot of Super Bowl, LI, you know. Possibly nothing, but interesting. Super LIG, Super Bowl, LI. I also noticed on Zach's blog that the sum of the divisors of 911 are 912. Obviously, right? Because it's 1 and 911, it's a prime number. But just interesting because Super Bowl LI equals 912. So then I talked about when I lived in Des Moines again. And then I say, haha, now heart-shaped boxes play. Heart-shaped box equals 65, like Nirvana. You know? Like Prince. Like Philadelphia. It's a super important number. So the movie Flipper. I looked up the movie Flipper then, which I should have talked about this like 3 hours ago or whatever, but the dad in the movie is named Porter Ricks, and he's played by Chuck Connors. Porter Ricks in gematria equals 152, just like Super Bowl LI. Flipper is set in the Florida Keys. You know, pretty interesting. The guy who played him even died on my birthday, my 10th birthday. Just kind of weird. You know, and possibly nothing, but it's just something that you notice. When it's your birthday, you notice it, you know. Like, oh, wow, that guy died on my birthday. He's even was a famous sports player, too. He's the first guy credited with breaking the backboard. And I didn't even re-look this up, but I figure there's some type of connection to Shaquille O'Neal and the death of Daryl Dawkins. Shaq started his career in Orlando. Dawkins was from Orlando. Shaq won a title with Miami. He also went to LSU, which connects up to Nebraska and Michigan State and the death of Sam Foltz and Mike Sadler. Kobe Delahousse was the player who survived from, you know, he played for LSU. Louisiana State equals 166. It also, I don't know, I wrote Darvin Ham in here. He must have broke the backboard. He did break the backboard. Texas Tech player in the 1996 NCAA tournament against North Carolina. But Texas Tech is in Lubbock, Texas. That connects to Ryan Tannehill. That guy even went on to win a championship with the Detroit Pistons against the Lakers. And that series came to an end on June 15th, right? The 166th day of the year. But it was in 2004, so it was a leap year, so it was the 167th day, actually. I then went on and mentioned, I'm just questioning it. Would they really do a Dolphins-Lions Super Bowl? I mean, it doesn't seem like they would, but I've seen crazier things, you know? And you got Sue, who's the former Lion, and Dan Marino. His name's Daniel. You got Daniel in the Lion's Den. I know they've changed something somewhere because a long time ago, I have in my notes that Dan from the tribe of Dan was born on the 9th of Elul, which was the 12th month of the Jewish civil calendar, which is a lot like 9/12, right? And the tribe of Dan were known as the Judges, which was super fitting to all of the Moses, lawgiver type stuff I've talked about. We had the death of Antonin Scalia in 2016. His name equals 51 in gematria. He died on a date numerology of 51. Talked about the Texas judge, Julie Kokorek, who got shot outside of her house in 2014 or whatever. Can't remember what it was all synced up to. It was synced up to Antonin Scalia, though. But her name equals 51 in gematria. And we also had the death of Uncle Phil before Super Bowl 48. And then we had the death of Philip Seymour Hoffman. And there was even something to do with Phil from, can't even think of the show, I never watched it, the Duck Dynasty, talking about gay people or whatever. There's a bunch of Phil stuff in the news around that time. But Uncle Phil was a judge, right? And I'm talking about the Fresh Prince in Philadelphia. Samson also killed the lion. He was in the tribe of Dan. Daniel equals 79 in Jewish gematria, just like Miami equals 79 in Jewish gematria. Champion equals 79 in Jewish gematria. Murder equals 79. I mean, champion equals it in simple gematria. I also pointed out that the only time that the Bible mentions the number 318, it talks about Dan. 318 trained men born in the household and went and pursued as far as Dan. And just interesting that my name's Dan too, and somehow I'm noticing it. Maybe synced up to Dan Marino. If you go from November 10th, then the day that guy died in 1992, and you go to his birthday, his 72nd birthday, he died 152 days before his birthday. And I'm talking about the dad on Flipper. He died 152 days before his 72nd birthday, also a span of 5 months, 1 day. Once again, reminding us of the Super Bowl. He began his baseball career on, well, I can't scroll down because of this thing here. He began his baseball career on May 1st, 5-1, and he finished it on September 30th, 1951 for the Chicago Cubs. Just interesting, the 51s. Jesus is known as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Judah equals 813, like the reverse of the 318. Lion equals 119, like Dolly Parton's birthday, like all the 119, 9/11 symbolism. Tribe of Judah equals 119 in simple gematria. In regards to Jesus as well, in 9/11, there's a lot of people on YouTube and whatnot talking about how Jesus' real birthday is 9/11 and whatever, and that's why they did the attacks on 9/11 to mock Jesus and whatnot. So just throwing that out there. Another thing that lots of people are talking about and how it would possibly connect to Jesus. So I noticed too with Gary Shandling, he died 318 days before the Super Bowl in 10 months and 12 days. But it's also normally the 83rd day of the year. Football equals 83. And it can also be written 24/3, the 243rd day of the year. Just so happens to be August 31st, 31/8, a lot like 318. That's the day that Princess Diana died. It's also the day that the worst ever recorded East Coast earthquake was. It was in Charleston in 1886. It's also the day that Apollo Creed in the movie Rocky dies in the year 1985. Think about Rocky and earthquakes. The Super Bowl this year is going to be played on a date numerology of 44. Earthquake equals 44. You know what I think? I don't think anything's going to happen at the Super Bowl. I think on the day of the Super Bowl or one of the days before or after, there's going to be a big significant story in some other place that's connected to it, but it's not actually in Houston. But we'll see. In regards to the King James Bible in March 24th and the 318 connections, King James, the guy responsible for the King James Bible, his reign began on March 24th of the year 1603. And then he was, of course, King Charles's father. And he became king after Elizabeth I. And right now we have Elizabeth II. So just some interesting symbolism. That means she died on March 24th. March 24th was also the day that Thomas E. Dewey was born, which is interesting, how he connected to Trump and the growing pains and all kinds of other stuff. So let's look at Keion Carpenter then. So the very next day, we have the death of Keion Carpenter. Just ridiculous. Jesus the Carpenter, talking about the key of David. Then we get the death of Keion Carpenter. He died on 12/29/2016 with the date numerology of 77. Jesus equals 77. He was born in the year 77. It said that he played 83 career games, notched 14 interceptions. Football equals 83. Played for the Falcons and the Bills. He died age 39. And if you use the end date, he also died 39 days before the Super Bowl this year. 39 in gematria equals 142, like Miami Dolphins. He died in Miami, Florida. He was from Baltimore, where the Colts are originally from. Instantly, when I saw the story, too, about a carpenter in regards to football, I thought of Michigan. I thought of the Miami Dolphins' old field goal kicker, Dan Carpenter. Once again, Dan. And then the Carpenter, and he now plays for the Buffalo Bills. Syncing it up to, McKinley and Richie Incognito. I also noticed that Dan Carpenter just so happens to be from Omaha, Nebraska, which is pretty interesting. You know, and in regards to all the stuff I talked about, his name equals 95 and 203. If you write out 318, it equals 203. I even talked about the death of the Omaha police officer Carrie Fisher a long time ago, and it was synced up a whole bunch to this number as well. I didn't know what it meant at the time, and now I'm starting to see all these connections to this number, and I keep seeing these numbers over and over now. His name is small equals 95, just like Tannehill. And what's interesting, in Keion Carpenter playing for the Atlanta Falcons, in the Simpsons episode with Dan Marino, the Falcons win the Super Bowl in Miami against the Broncos. But in real life, the Falcons lost to the Broncos. And who knows, you know, Falcons had 19 points, and the Dolphins went to Super Bowl 19. It's also a total score of 53 points. Super Bowl LI, the small way, 53. The Falcons and the Broncos this year both had regular season records of 14 and 2. Miami Dolphins equals 142. And when I was thinking about the Falcons, a long time ago, when I was talking about Philando Castile being killed in Falcon Heights, Minnesota, where Teddy Roosevelt gave the famous speech and whatnot, just interesting in regards to Atlanta Falcons. Possibly it's connected to that. I even mentioned, you know, Falcons and whatever. You know, it just reminds me of some type of Native American theme because of just a falcon. I don't know. You think of Horus as well. Keion Carpenter's 39th birthday was also 97 days before the Super Bowl this year. We're in the 97th season of the NFL. Dolphins equal 97. That's also, you know, the anniversary of Richie Incognito and the bullying scandal beginning. His 36th birthday was that day. The name Keion, when you look it up, it means King of Kings, right? Jesus was the King of Kings. He played college at Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech just made a comeback against Arkansas in the Belk Bowl. The total score of 59. Keion Carpenter died 59 days after his birthday. Atlanta, Georgia equals 59. And then, of course, all the 59 stuff in regards to, you know, black people. Slave 59, Negro 59, Cotton Picker 59. You know, pretty much that's a huge number stamped on racist things. Arkansas's lead receiver in the game was also named Keion Hatcher. The way you spell his name equals 105. He had 105 yards. And look at that. He was born on September 11th, 1994. 9/11 also is the day that leaves 111 days in the year. Pope Francis's real name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, equals 111. Queen Elizabeth, born on the 111th day of the year. This year it was the 112th. So just interesting, Francis got key. People talk about Jesus being born on 9/11. I went to Wikipedia too, where I just typed in the name Keion. Like, these were the only ones that came up. And I just looked at some of them. Keion Daniel was the very first one. You know, what are the odds that it's Keion Daniel? And then Keion Clark was the next one. And you click on Keion Clark, and he lives in Danville, Illinois. You know, that's some pretty weird stuff. The first two on there. It even tells us how he was arrested in Houston and then sent back to Danville or whatever, boarding a bus in Houston, Texas. And he's 41 years old, like Super Bowl. Possibly nothing, you know, but just interesting. And I've mentioned before the whole Jesus Christ equals 151, like Dallas Cowboys. And, you know, I talked about it. Maybe I didn't make a video on it, but I talked about Ezekiel Elliott jumping in the Salvation Army kettle and whatnot. Kettle Hop 112, Houston 112. Salvation Army established on 7/2, 151 years ago. You know, who knows? You can come read my blog. If I don't have a video on that. Let's move on here. So, I didn't get to watch the Nebraska game because I forgot to record it and I had to work. But when I came home, the local news was on and they had some clips and it paused and it showed the total stats or whatever. So I went to ESPN and got it, but it said Nebraska had 318 total yards. You know, I've been talking about how it's connected to the Nebraska Cornhuskers in some weird way. 318 total yards. Number 17, Riker Fife, scored the touchdown when Nebraska had 17 points. He even completed 17 passes for 243 yards. Once again, 243rd day, 31/8. And I've made a bunch of videos in regards to Nebraska and the number 17. It even synced up to Michigan as well. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff. I don't even remember it all. Like, Tommy Armstrong Jr. got hurt, like scored the 17th point with 7-1-7 in the fourth, and then he got hurt. Stuff like that. It was like all over Nebraska pretty much the whole season. Or pretty much after they started losing, that's when I started seeing the 17s like crazy with them. Cornhuskers in Gematria equals 151. Volunteers, who Tennessee is, they equal 43 and 151. Jesus Christ equals 43, 151. Christ equals 77. Tennessee Volunteers equals 77. I never noticed before either that Jesus Christ equaled 43 the small way. I just never put it together. But like Dolphins equal 43. It's also a number that was super connected to Nebraska and the Civil War and Moses. Everything about Moses is either 34 or 43. There's also some things that are 25, which is, with the S exception, they're 34 or whatever. And, the Super Bowl's on 2-5. But anyway, in regards to 43, Nebraska had 43 conference championships going into this year. Sam Foltz died 43 days before Nebraska's first game playing Fresno State. That equals 43 in Gematria. In that game, Nebraska scored 43 points. And Sam Foltz died with Mike Sadler. In Gematria, Mike Sadler equals 43. 1 month, 12 days is also sometimes 43 days. Sam Foltz, the big way, equals 43. Civil War equals 43. Nebraska plays in Lincoln, right? Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, Civil War, nicknamed the Sea of Red. Moses freed the slaves. Lincoln freed the slaves. Lincoln was born on the 43rd day of the year. Became president on 3/4 or also 4/3. He died 4 years, 3 days after the Civil War began. Lincoln equals 34. Just tons of stuff in regards to the 43. And, I was talking about the black shirts last year as well. And the black shirts had Zach Bowman. And he was like the first black shirt to give up his black shirt when they started doing bad in the 90s or whatever. But he was also a Miami Dolphin last year. There's lots of stuff that connects up to the Miami Dolphins, Sue the Dolphin, Sue the Dolphin, Incognito the Dolphin. So let's move on. 2 more posts. This video is going to be the longest video I've ever made, ever. I wonder if YouTube will even allow me to put it up on YouTube. Maybe I'll have to just chop it up or whatever. So, in regards to 17s, Dan Marino, so like I said, all the 17s in regards to Nebraska and whatnot, I found this article about Dan Marino being honored in Week 17 when the Dolphins played the Patriots. And they mentioned that Dan Marino played 17 seasons. And I went and looked, and his last game was January 15th of the year 2000. So this year on January 15th, it will be the 17th anniversary of Dan Marino's final game of playing 17 seasons. Ryan Tannehill wears number 17. Tannehill was hurt after playing 13 games, and Marino wore number 13. Also, it would be pretty fitting if Tannehill comes back for the wild card game, because then it would be 14, 15, 16. 17. He would go to the Super Bowl on his 17th game if they make the Super Bowl. So I figured I'd look up Marino's 51st game and significant games possibly. His 51st game ever was, of course, against the Indianapolis Colts. And look at the score, 17-13. Everything that I've been talking about, is whatever. Craziness. 17-13. The very next game was against Houston as well. Possibly nothing, but interesting. The very next game against Houston on November 2nd, 112. Houston equals 112. Marino's 17th career playoff game, and also the 17th of his final season, the 17th game, they beat Seattle 20-17. Marino had threw 17 passes. They beat Seattle, who scored 17 points in his 17th game of the season, in his 17th season. If you add up the score too, 20-17, it equals 37. If you write out the word 17, it equals 37. On his final game, if you notice on the final game, they lost by 55 points. Well, interesting that he would go out on that, because if you write out 17 with the V exception, 17 equals 55. He lost by 55 points. He's currently 55 years old since September 15th of this year. I wrote 17 in there, but I meant to write 16. And I'm not going to go through all these, but just look at all the 17s in a lot of his playoff games here, There was a 17 score. I don't even know. There was all kinds of 17s if you really look through here. And of course, because it's the first game of the playoffs, so it'll be the 17th game. But there was a whole bunch of other connections to 17 when I was looking through here. And then, of course, it connects to Super Bowl 5, like I've been saying forever, the Cowboys versus the Colts, who played on the 17th day of in the year 71 in Miami in the Orange Bowl. Orange Bowl equals 112 as well. Marino's final game, they lost to Jacksonville. But look at Jacksonville's record became 15-2. Super Bowl LI equals 152. The Dolphins had 7 points. The 7th prime number is 17. And remember, in regards to 72 of the 72 Dolphins, they went 17-0 because they didn't play 17 weeks at the time. So the 72 Dolphins even had a 17-0 record. In the Michigan game, I need to go back and watch this too, in the Orange Bowl this year. There was all kinds of little things that they were saying and announcing and whatever. You had Brian Greasy, and then you had his dad come in and talk for a while. And his dad talked about how him and Brian were the only father-son to be in the Rose Bowl Hall of Fame. And when they talked about this, the clock was stopped at 8:13, and Brian Greasy just so happened to be born on 3/18. He also was one of the backup quarterbacks in Super Bowl 33, and he won with the Broncos or whatever behind John Elway. The one that I'm talking about where Dan Marino's in the Simpsons episode, and they say the Falcons win, but really the Broncos win. I mean, how interesting. And this one was played in Miami as well. Brian Greasy, also 41 years old, like Super Bowl. And there was even a part in this when Bob Greasy was talking, they stopped the clock at 7:17, and they asked him something about if the Dolphins can make a Super Bowl run and whatnot. And then he said, oh yeah, something, going to play the Steelers, which they are, or most likely going to play the Steelers. We blew them out in the beginning of the season or whatever. Just interesting that they would even, I don't know, not really that interesting that they bring it up, but still, it's just the way they talk about it. You just got to go back and listen to the way they speak, because they give clues with even like the pauses and things that they do. So I noticed that if you go from Dan Marino's birthday to Ryan Tannehill's birthday, it's a span of 10 months, 12 days. How interesting, The Simpsons episode was season 10, episode 12. Houston won the division, beating the Bengals 12-10 or 10-12. The Dolphins lost the first game of the season to Seattle 10-12. If you read out 1,012, it equals 70, just like Miami Dolphins. And throughout this video, I mentioned how it's connected to all my uncles and whatnot having cancer. And my mom's dad, or whatever, was the original one of them all that died of cancer before I was born. And he just so happened to be born on 10/12, of 1928. So pretty interesting that he was born on that day. If you go from his birthday to my birthday, a span of 29 days, like the word football. If you go from his birthday to the day that he died, a span of 2 months, 9 days, like football, but also 70 days, like Miami Dolphins. If you read out 70 in Gematria, it equals 29, just like football. And the 72 Dolphins were even trying to win the Super Bowl 17-0, and they kicked a field goal and it was blocked, and then the score came to an end at 14-7 or whatever. And I've talked about this before. There's a whole lot of stuff into it. I need to go back and look, but I know I have videos on this, the Garo's gaff and whatever, GG, the 77, interesting, GG 77, Jesus equals 77. But the MVP of that Super Bowl was Jake Scott, who just so happened to wear number 13 for the Miami Dolphins, and then Dan Marino later made number 13 famous. But I mean, this guy was the MVP. Interesting, He's even 71 years old right now. I'm talking about the 71 season. I mean, fitting that he played in Miami too. He's born in the year 45. He also played for the BC Lions and played for the Redskins, which the 72 Dolphins beat in the Super Bowl. He was the 159th pick in the draft. Dan Marino born on 15/9. And of course, Wikipedia just completely words things hilarious. They talk about, the following year he recorded 7 interceptions and 318 punt return yards, helping the team reach Super Bowl VI, which they lost 24-3. Just kind of funny, 318, and then they lost 24-3, the number connecting back to 318 by August 31st. And we talked about Apollo Creed, or Carl Weathers. He also, in real life, played for the BC Lions. In the 72 Dolphins, there was also a quarterback thing. Bob Greasy broke his leg, and 17-year veteran Earl Morrall led the team to the Super Bowl. His name equals 53, like Super Bowl LI. The 17-year veteran. Just think about how that connects to this year. Tannehill wearing number 17. He gets injured, before the Super Bowl, whatnot. We got Matt Moore winning games. So in Super Bowl, or the 72 Dolphins, Bob Greasy even returned the game before the Super Bowl, and he returned in the second half, and he led the team to a 21-17 win. And then on Wikipedia, they even tell us about the Redskins that year, and they say, following the death of Vince Lombardi 17 days prior to the start of the 1970 season. Interesting, why do they even mention that? 17 days before the 1970 season, and it was in the 72 Dolphins. The pregame show was a tribute to Apollo 17. How interesting is that? And then we got the Super Bowl this year played in Houston, reminding us of, the Space Center and whatnot. Houston, we have a problem, whatever. Apollo 17. We just had the death of whatever. John Glenn, and then Buzz Aldrin was in the hospital. I talked about all this moon symbolism, and Prince dying on the Simpsons episode with Neil Armstrong, the first guy to walk on the moon. Think about all the Teen Wolf stuff and how it connects to the moon. Prince Charles's wife Diana. Diana is the goddess of the moon. It also mentions that the Dolphins were using the 53 defense, what Bill Arnsparger called the 53 defense. And basically it was used around this guy, Bob Matheson, number 53, That's why they called it the 53 defense. Just reminds me a lot of last year, and a lot of stuff was talking about the 85 Bears, and Chicago equals 46. The Patriots lost in that one, or Chicago won 46-10. They beat the Patriots. Patriots equal 46. Chicago equals 46. Chicago scored 46 points. And they were using the revolutionary 4-6 defense. I mean, crazy. Just reminds me of that. And 53 is special because Super Bowl LI equals 53. And the guy who created it, Bill Arnsparger, equals 152, like Super Bowl LI the big way. The player that it was based around, number 53, his name equals 51 in Gematria. Somebody also told me about this. The Finns had 2 major deaths this year. Bill Stanfill, born on January 31st, 131, and he died on 11/10. You know, and then the other guy was Fulton Walker, and he died on 10/12. And Don Shula was drafted in 51. A lot of good stuff here. But interesting, Bill Stanfill, born on something that syncs up to Super Bowl, and then he died on my birthday this year, my 34th birthday. And the reason that that day is special is because it's the day that leaves 51 days in the year. So I also posted about Marino's final game was on January 15th of the year 2000, which in other parts of the world they're at 15/1, a lot like 151. Jesus Christ 151, Dallas Cowboys 151, Cornhuskers 151, Volunteers 151. It's just the mirrors too, the reflection of 51 both ways as well. Super Bowl 51. I also pointed out that Dan Marino's middle name is Constantine, and Constantine created the Edict of Milan in the year 313 AD, supposedly protecting Christians. If you read out 603 like the mark of the beast, it equals 313. Pope Francis became the Pope on 3/13 of the year 13. The year that I'm talking about that it really seems to be synced up to, in the Dolphins-bullying scandal, Pope Francis became the Pope that same year. JFK in the Zapruder film was even shot on slide 313 or whatever. In regards to Pope Francis too, he became the Pope 232 days before the Dolphins bullying scandal. The word Satan equals 232 in Gematria. And Pope Francis's 80th birthday on December 17th this year, if you include the end date, it was 51 days before Super Bowl 51. Constantine, though, in Gematria equals 134, like King Charles III. And, of course, Constantine reminds me of the movie with Keanu Reeves and whatnot. And in the Super Bowl that the Simpsons were foreshadowing, the coach of the Atlanta Falcons was Dan Reeves. And Dan Reeves played with the Dallas Cowboys in Super Bowl 5 and 6. The one where Dallas played the Colts and the Dolphins. And there's a TV show called Constantine that was based off of the movie, and it only had 13 episodes. And trying to find it here. The guy who played Constantine, his name was Matt Ryan. It equals 112. So interesting. And that's the Atlanta Falcons quarterback's name as well, Matt Ryan, Constantine, on the TV show that lasted 13 episodes. Keanu Charles Reeves equals 75 and 192, identical to Indianapolis Colts. Pretty interesting. In Dan Reeves' Wikipedia, they even mention how he had a great game against Nebraska, and they were the Big 8 champion or whatever, but he had a great game against them. Just kind of weird that they even write that in there, you know. There wasn't very much else written about it, but they made sure to put something about him having a good game at Nebraska. His name equals 119 in Gematria, and he was also born on January 19th. January 19th is 17 days before Super Bowl 51. And when I think of the Falcons, I always think of Andre Rison and his relationship with Lisa Left Eye Lopez. I made a video on her way back when, I think before I even knew Gematria, and she's connected to Aaliyah, which also means return to Zion, and I have a whole post on that as well in regards to some weird stuff that was happening to me. I was talking about the Hoboken train wreck, and I opened up this old Eustace Mullins book that I have, and the very first line is talking about how the Federal Reserve began at the Hoboken train station. And the Hoboken train wreck this year was one of the big reasons why I was pretty sure the Cubs and the Indians were going to be in the World Series. I mean, I talked about it, led it up to there, but that day I was pretty sure it was going to be them two teams just by following this coding that I'm talking about and how it was connected to the things in my own personal life. But Eustace Mullins was like a protege of Ezra Pound, and Ezra in the Bible is the guy who rebuilds the wall around Jerusalem. And Ezra and Nehemiah kind of go together or whatever. And I'm reminded of an old story about Nehemiah Griego, this kid, 15-year-old kid who shot his family up. His dad was a pastor, and whatever, his dad was the 51-year-old dad. And he did it on January 19th of 2013 in New Mexico. I didn't go back and look at that. Aaliyah's full name in Gematria equals 70 and 151, seemingly connected to the Dolphins and the Cowboys. In regards to 70, Giants also equals 70, so, possibly all of the Dolphin stuff I'm talking about in regards to the 70 somehow is synced up to New York and whatnot. Atlanta, though, also has the R&B group called 112, right? They have the song Peaches and Cream, and they even toured with Whitney Houston. And Lisa Left Eye Lopez started Andre Rison's house on fire by burning his shoes in the bathtub, which reminds us of Whitney and her daughter Bobby Christina, and both of their deaths were synced up to the Super Bowls. So, just super interesting. I'm not sure how it all connects. I remember her death was something to do with voodoo and stuff like that. She went to somewhere and she killed the kid or something. I can't remember the whole story, but there was some interesting stuff going on with it. Anyway, look at Andre Rison's birthday, 3/18. Interesting, What are the odds? And his nickname was Bad Moon, right? I'm talking about all this moon symbolism, and his nickname is Bad Moon. If you read about Lisa Left Eye Lopez, she has a bunch of moon tattoos. Her first solo album was supposed to be called A New Star Is Born, which reminds me of Alan Thicke in the 51st episode of Growing Pains that was called A Star Is Born. Reminded me of the Dallas Cowboys and the Star. But they changed the name to Supernova, that equals 41 and 131, identical to Super Bowl. So, man, let's get going here. A few more to talk about. Something I noticed in regards to the 1012 or 1012, which kind of sucks, because it seems like it's pointing towards the Patriots. But possibly not, because Tom Brady's in his 17th season and Dan Marino played 17 seasons. Maybe they're just showing us that the Patriots are going to get rocked after winning one game or something. They're not going to win, and just like Dan Marino or whatever. Who knows? But I looked up, I noticed that the quarterbacks, and there's been the quarterback dilemma for the Patriots, Tom Brady, number 12, and Jimmy Garoppolo, number 10, 10, 12. And Jacoby Brissett, whereas number 7, connected to the 17 as well, but he was born on December 11th, which is the same day that Ryan Tannehill got injured on his 13th game. Jimmy Garoppolo, born on 11/2, 112, like Houston. He's also 25 years old. They even mention how in college he broke Tony Romo's school records for career passing touchdowns and a bunch of stuff. So interesting. Tony Romo also born on the 112th day of the year. Once again, showing us the Cowboys, it seems. And then I talked about if the Patriots won on week 17. The Patriots did win. They're 14-2. And the Dolphins became 10-6 though, like the word prophecy. Miami Dolphins equals 142. The Patriots had 35 points. Tom Brady equals 35, but if you write out 35, it equals 142 like Miami Dolphins. So, the actual Patriots versus Dolphins in Week 17. So, in the game, they brought up the stat that the last time that Miami won a playoff game was against the Indianapolis Colts, and they won 23-17. Interesting, you know. Two numbers I've mentioned in regards to them. The whole time they showed this stat, they showed Dallas and Philadelphia on the bottom of the screen. Dallas had 13 points. Philadelphia had 17 points. You know, how interesting. All of it. I talked about the key of David in regards to Philadelphia, a lot about Dallas and Indianapolis, and then how it connects to Miami. The Dolphins also won this game on a 17-yard play. So they beat the Colts, who had 17 points, and the Dolphins had a 17-yard play to win the game. I showed this earlier. Talked about all that in regards to Space Jam and Valentine's Day. I talked about when I was typing this up, this Blue Wilderness dog, my computer shut off, and this Blue Wilderness dog food thing commercial came on the TV, and I was typing all about Lupercalia. And the TV show that my girlfriend was watching was called The Reba or whatever, starring Reba McEntire, which reminds me of Dolly Parton a little bit, both famous women country singers. She was born 51 days after Super Bowl 51 will be played. She's also in the movie The Little Rascals. If you remember, she's like the race car driver lady. I didn't go back and watch that movie, but I remember that. And in that movie, the new kid, the rich kid that moves to town and gets the nice race car, his dad's Donald Trump in that movie. And I've talked about all these JJs as well. And think about the connection of Jimmy Johnson, the Cowboys coach, who also coached the Miami Dolphins. Jimmy Johnson, the race car driver, won NASCAR this year. He drives number 48. Donald Trump equals 48. It's all crazy interrelated. I noticed in this game, too, when the Patriots had, it was 17-0, Tom Brady was 10 of 12 passing with 88 yards. So, who knows? It really could be foreshadowing all to the Patriots. Talked about all these colors earlier, I'm pretty sure. The Dolphins in Week 17 also lost by 19 points. Just reminding me of Super Bowl 19, the last time that they've been to the Super Bowl. So earlier I also mentioned Back to the Future, and the Cubs were supposed to beat Miami and synced up to Miami, the Miami Marlins. Miami Marlins equals 131 in Gematria. And we had the death of Jose Fernandez this year, the Miami Marlin player. His name in Gematria just so happens to equal 70 and 142 like Miami Dolphins. He died on the day that leaves 97 days in the year. Dolphins equal 97. It's the 97th season of the NFL. The final game that he played was also Miami's 151st game of the season. You know, once again, Jesus Christ, Dallas Cowboys. He died in between these two games, though. He died after the Atlanta game and just before the New York game. So, something to point out. I also pointed out in this post, Nick Saban, who's the coach of Alabama, who's going to be playing in the college football championship. And he used to coach the Miami Dolphins, and he also used to coach LSU, and the reason that's significant is because in 1971, when Nebraska won its first championship, they beat LSU, and then the very next year in the 1971-72 season, Nebraska beat Alabama in the national championship as well. So they won back-to-back national championships Mike Riley, the current Nebraska coach, was on that team of Alabama when they lost in 1972 to the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Alabama is playing Clemson, and it's 27 days before the Super Bowl. Miami equals 27. Clemson equals 27. Nick Saban's birthday is 97 days before Super Bowl 51. He was born in the year 51. He only coached the Dolphins for one season. It was the 2005 season. And he coached them to a record of 9-7, right? The Dolphins equal 97, 97th season of the NFL. You know, in regards to how it interrelates to baseball, in the 2005 baseball season, that was when the Chicago White Sox won. And I talked a lot about that in regards to the Hoboken train wreck and whatnot, and how the Chicago Cubs tied the Pittsburgh Pirates this year. It was the first time since 2005. And that year, Houston tied, can't even remember, Houston tied, can't remember who they played, but they tied, and it was 112 days before the World Series began that year. Houston equals 112. Last year we had the 112th World Series that ended on 11-2. And then now we have the Super Bowl being played this year in Houston. So I don't know what the connection is, but there's something significant about 2005. Possibly it's something to do with Barack Obama. You know, Barack Obama does equal, or Obama equals 192 like NFL. He became the president in this year. But in regards to 88, Trump equals 88. And when the White Sox won, it was the first time in 88 seasons. And Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88. Talked about all these 88s. You know, in regards to The Simpsons, I even talked about how the voice of Bart Simpson she turned 57 on the same day that the World Series began this year. And there was a whole bunch of stuff connecting to the Bart Earthquake series in 1989. But anyway, 57 World Series equals 57. And Steve Bartman, the guy who cursed the Cubs as well, and then the voice of Bart Simpson, turns 57 on the day that the World Series began this year. So in 2005 then, when Nick Saban coached the Miami Dolphins, the Seattle Seahawks lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl that year. Interesting, it's not 10-12, but it's similar, you know, it's 10-21. And then the Dolphins are going to play their wild card game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think didn't the Dolphins win 30-15 in the regular season against the Steelers as well? Total of 45. You know, Miami equals 45. This one's funny because 21-10 equals 31. Steelers equal 31. It's also interesting because the date of it is February 5th, just like the Super Bowl that's going to be played this year. It was held in Detroit. Hines Ward was the MVP. And we've talked a lot about Batman when the stadium collapses and the Hines Ward's running down or whatever. And I also mentioned Oblivion earlier in the video in regards to the number 166 and how they were foreshadowing 2017 Super Bowl to be the last. So, one last little topic here in regards to the Dolphins. Yesterday we got this story about this Dakota Access Pipeline guy climbing up at the Minnesota Vikings stadium and dropping this banner or whatever, and he's hanging here. And thankfully for the comments, someone pointed out some great information in regards to it. But anyway, the sign said divest, and divest equals 25, 43, and 79 in gematria. Remember, Dolphins equal 43, Miami Dolphins equals 79 with the S exception. Standing Rock Sioux equals 79. And I pointed out that this person is wearing a Brett Favre jersey, a Minnesota Vikings Brett Favre jersey. Favre equals 25, just like the big word that he put on the banner, divest. Brett Favre in gematria equals 45 like Miami. In the article, they even mention how they looked like Spider-Man. Spider-Man in Gematria equals 45. Miami 45. Favre also beat the Patriots in Super Bowl 31. So possibly that's what they're showing us. The Dolphins can beat the Patriots. Notice the guy too, in the CNN article, they show this guy's tweets. David McCoy. David McCoy equals 45 as well. And they show this picture from Instagram. It has 8 likes and 8 comments. The Vikings and the Colts just won their final games of the season, finishing 8-8. The year of the Dolphins bullying scandal, the Dolphins also finished 8-8. I also noticed this guy's wearing Chuck Taylors, and I just decided to look up the shoe Converse All-Star Chuck Taylors, and they came out in the year 1917, and I'm talking about all these 17s in regards to the Miami Dolphins. Anyway, I didn't know what else to think about it. I thought possibly they were maybe showing us the Packers yet again because of Brett Favre or possibly Atlanta. But somebody pointed out in the comments that in the movie There's Something About Mary, Brett Favre shows up and he says that he's in town to play the Dolphins, which is interesting because there's something about Mary in Gematria equals 112, and of course Houston equals 112, blah, blah, blah. But I should have went back and watched this whole movie. I just kind of went to the end of the movie because I wanted to see this Brett Favre part. But basically, he calls Brett Favre to get him back together with Mary, and then Mary doesn't even want any of these guys in the movie. And she goes back out to Ben Stiller, who's crying, and then she says, "You forgot your keys." And, just interesting, all of the key stuff that I mentioned. And then after that, whatever, they get together and the movie kind of ends. Or the one guy tries to assassinate Ben Stiller and he misses. Possibly showing us an assassination attempt on like Donald Trump or something. Some type of political assassination that they've really been foreshadowing a whole lot. The plot in the movie begins in the year 85, the year the Dolphins last went to the Super Bowl. And then it skips over 13 years. Dan Marino, number 13. They're also 29 years old in the movie. Football equals 29. She's living in Miami because she's an orthopedic surgeon. That equals 95. Tannehill, 95. Cameron Michelle Diaz equals 95. She plays Mary Jensen in the movie. That equals 43, like Dolphins. She also got her big start in the Jim Carrey movie, The Mask, or whatever. And Jim Carrey reminds us of Ace Ventura. It's all about Dan Marino and, Laces Out. That movie's super fitting for the times as well. I'm surprised it's not, boycotted because they're joking about transgenders or whatever, It's just crazy. I'm surprised. I bet you that's going to be a CNN article sometime soon. Something about how the creators of Ace Ventura are, prejudiced and whatever else. Anyway, the title of the movie, There's Something About Mary. I think I figured out what the something is. Mary in Gematria equals 511, just like Saturn, the keeper of time. What all these people who worship these numbers and do this, they love Saturn. So, super interesting that Mary equals the same as Saturn. Wikipedia even lets us know that she married Benji Madden, the guy from Good Charlotte, and she was only engaged for 17 days. Why in the world does that even matter? Why is that in there, And I made a video about Good Charlotte because it's connected to Charlotte is the feminine form of Charles, and whatever. I've talked all kinds of stuff about the royal family in regards to the English Civil War and Prince Charles becoming King Charles III. But on their first album, their first big album, I think it was their second album, it has a nuclear blast, and they're all sitting there watching the TV, and the TV has the nuclear blast on it. Cameron Diaz, I also always think of Justin Timberlake. Whatever. He was born on January 31st, like Super Bowl, and remember him and Janet Jackson had the whole boob hanging out on the Super Bowl, and we just got the stupid story about Mariah Carey messing up on New Year's Eve and whatever. In the CNN article, they even brought back up the Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake thing. So, and I've made a bunch of posts, and I haven't made a video on it, but talking about how there's something going on with trolls. South Park, the whole season was about trolling, and we had the new movie called Trolls coming out, and a bunch of other stuff. But in that movie, Justin Timberlake's the lead voice of the lead troll or whatever. Ben Stiller, also 51 years old. His full name in Gematria equals 112, just like there's something about Mary. And in regards to all the Super Bowl 48 stuff I talked about and the death of Philip Seymour Hoffman, it reminds me of Along Came Polly, the other Ben Stiller movie. That's pretty, I mean, he's got a ton of other movies, you know, but I guess the point is, I'm sure there's something significant about this movie in regards to the Super Bowl, just because it's connected to Super Bowl 48. But holy cow, this video is going to be really long. I don't even know if YouTube will even let me post it. I'll probably have to just split it up and then make a giant playlist or something. And I know most people won't want to listen to a video that's like 3 hours long anyway, because people don't have the attention span, you know. But gonna end it there. Hopefully that makes sense. Gonna keep following the story, but it seems like a lot of stuff is showing up for, you know, they've been doing it for however long. I just thought it was connected to a possible rematch of the Colts and the Cowboys, but now I'm starting to think that it's really just connected to Miami. You know, that's where the Super Bowl is played and all kinds of stuff. So we'll find out. You know, it doesn't even matter. All of this stuff is super coded. Everything that I talked about in this video, I guarantee, maybe I don't have it all figured out, but I guarantee within the next year, there'll be certain stuff that I'll be like, oh, that's what they were doing with this. It seems to happen a lot, but I've seemed to got better at what they're doing, closer to what they're actually trying to do. But possibly not. Possibly all the Dolphin stuff is for the Patriots or whatever. But leaving it at that. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. Hopefully I can put some other shorter videos out. I don't have to work for the next 3 days. I'm going to sleep forever tomorrow. Well, not forever, but I'm going to sleep until like 3, so peace.